Let's have a key race alert now. Donald Trump, the projected winner of the Republican presidential primary in New Hampshire. Trump easily defeating his very last standing major GOP opponent, Nikki Haley. Let's check out the votes. With 28% of the estimated vote in, Donald Trump is far and away in the lead with 55.5% of the vote. That's 50,551 votes. It's about 11,000 votes ahead of Nikki Haley, who's bringing up the rear at 43%. Again, that's with 28% of the vote in. We are still waiting for most of the vote to come in, but we do expect Donald Trump to be the winner. We're standing by to hear Donald Trump speak about his victory. We heard from Nikki Haley a short while ago. Here's a little bit of what she said.
The other day, Donald Trump accused me of not providing security at the Capitol on January 6th. Now, I've long called for mental competency tests for politicians over the age of 75. Trump claims he'd do better than me in one of those tests. Maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. But if he thinks that, then he should have no problem standing on a debate stage with me.
Tough words from Nikki Haley. Let's go to Kristen Holmes, who covers the Trump campaign for us. She's at Trump headquarters in Nashua. And Kristen, I don't suppose there is any second guessing about Trump's campaign strategy to avoid all debates or interviews with anybody who might ask a tough question. But the gauntlet has been thrown down by Governor Haley this evening.
It has, and I have no reason to believe that Donald Trump is going to take her up on that offer. I've asked about this numerous times over the last several months, whether or not Donald Trump would ever participate in a primary debate, and the answer is no. They believe that their strategy has worked. They have seen nothing but an increase in his poll numbers, and now he has won both Iowa and New Hampshire. They are not going to change tactic anytime soon. In their mind, the only thing that could happen in a debate like that is something that would hurt Donald Trump. And right now, they don't see any reason that they have to give her an answer or answer to her, since they still believe that they are the front runner. Now, I do want to say that for somebody who earlier today said that he didn't believe that Nikki Haley was a threat, that he didn't care if she stayed in the race or dropped out, he seems very angry tonight after her speech. He's been on social media ranting. He's called her delusional. He's saying that she got in third place last week. He repeated that she said she had to win New Hampshire, and she didn't. Clearly, he is worked up about this. Now, I have been told by allies that he is annoyed that she's still in the race. This idea that people have that if she drops out sooner rather than later, she might be able to save herself with Donald Trump. Donald Trump has been angry about her and believes that she is disloyal, and said that in private for running already. So it's something to keep in mind here, that in terms of saving yourself, she has been out there campaigning against him, which is a cardinal sin to Donald Trump, as we know. And as we already heard, after Ron DeSantis dropped out, endorsed Donald Trump, and then Donald Trump got on Fox and Friends and said that he wouldn't have DeSantis in his administration. So this idea that she has to drop out in order to please him is kind of hit or miss, and particularly when you see what he's posting right now on social media.
All right, Kristen, thanks so much. Let's go to Kylie Atwood right now, who's covering the Haley campaign. She's in Concord, New Hampshire. Boy, closing time where you are, Kylie. No, the campaign party is over, I suppose.
Well, yeah, the room's quieting down. It was pretty loud earlier. But listen, as Nikki Haley just got up there and said the race is far from over, when you talk to folks in Republican circles, Republican donors, what they're saying they're watching for closely tonight is what the margin, the final margin, actually looks like. And the reason that they're watching for that is that I'm told that if she comes within single digits of former President Trump, that it'll be much easier for her to gain momentum, to get more donors, to get more money that she needs. If she comes within double digits of the former president, it's going to be a lot harder for her to continue doing that. Now, Jake, Nikki Haley doesn't have a money problem right now, but this will matter if they are trying to compete, not just in South Carolina, but in those Super Tuesday states, which they are doubling down tonight, saying that they will. Campaign aides are saying that she has done much better than people were projecting her to, but we don't know what the final results are yet. So we'll wait and see kind of what they see when the final vote tally is actually in. Now, Nikki Haley, for her part, headed to South Carolina tomorrow. We know she has a big event there tomorrow night. And when you talk to aides, they say that they've begun mapping out campaigning in South Carolina over the course of the next month. But some of them privately acknowledge that those plans were going to be subject to what happens here in New Hampshire. And that's why this final margin for her is really going to matter.
All right, Kylie Atwood in Concord with the Haley campaign, and we're with John King right now at the Magic Wall. And John, right now, Donald Trump has more than a 12-point lead, approaching 13 ahead of Haley. We'll see how that shakes out towards the end with 29% of the vote in. You've been talking about Nashua and how Nikki Haley needs to do well in Nashua, the second most populous township in the state of New Hampshire. It looks red to me right now.
It is red at the moment. And so, again, sometimes politics is complicated. Sometimes it's the first math we learned. It's arithmetic, right? And so you want to get more votes where more people live, right? And Donald Trump, let's start in Manchester. That's the largest city. That's the biggest possible vote pool of votes in the state. And Donald Trump is getting 57% at the moment, and we're at 80% there. So he's winning where he needs to win. Right? Blue-collar Trump voters, the largest pool of voters, doing exactly what he needs to do. So, as we talked about, she needs to do. So, what's number two? Number two is Nashua. If your opponent's winning number one, you better win number two.
Oof.
We got a ways to go at 60%, but still, that's a gap. That's a gap. So again, it's you need to take away. He won this last time. You need to take it from him if you're going to get in the state. Now, to Kylie's point about the ultimate margin. We don't know which precincts these are out right now, so maybe when it comes back in, it gets closer. It gets closer some, and you can have a conversation with donors. That's a tough number. Again, in her defense, he's the most formidable force in the Republican Party. He was president of the United States, 4 years ago, and she's getting 43% of the vote. But that's still second place, which is important. Across the bottom of the state, right? We're talking about this as we go through. Another place we're watching, we said Nashua here. This is Hollis. It was another key Haley target. We don't have any votes yet. So again, in the idea, can she make this a single-digit race? That's a conversation. That's a question we can't answer just yet. Is Donald Trump going to win New Hampshire? Yes. Is Donald Trump going to win New Hampshire by a healthy margin? Yes. Will it be 13 points or 14 points, or will it shrink down a little bit? That's the unanswered question. At the moment, because you're starting to see the smaller towns north of Concord, there's a few Haleys in there, but most of these, a couple hundred votes here, 1,000 or so votes there, most of these are going to fill in for Donald Trump. And so that's what you're seeing. As these small towns start to trickle in, you're seeing the lead pad up. Is there a possibility in the somewhat larger communities down here, including a couple of good medium-sized suburban areas, can she narrow it some? Yes. But Trump is going to win. And at the moment, it looks like he's going to win with a double-digit lead. The pundits, the pollsters, the fundraisers can debate, is that strength or weakness. If you look at that map right there, you see Donald Trump won Iowa. Donald Trump won New Hampshire. Donald Trump has a lead in delegates. Only 2.5% of the delegates. By the end of tonight, these two contests, only 2.5% of the delegates will be awarded. Right, so there's still 97.5% of the Republican delegates to be awarded, and the conversation is this race over? So you can understand Governor Haley when she says that's preposterous. You can also understand Donald Trump when he says nobody's ever won. No Republican has ever won Iowa and New Hampshire before. I just did.
Yeah, and also just to defend Iowa and New Hampshire for 1 second, these are smaller states where upsets can happen. Upsets often do happen in Iowa, and John McCain upset things in 2000. Gary Hart upset things in New Hampshire in 1984. I mean, the nature of these states allows candidates who are not the establishment. Right. And I think right now we have an interesting dynamic in that Donald Trump is the establishment candidate. Nikki Haley, even if she represents the Republican Party of old, she's really the insurgent candidate.
I think you just made a critical point. She's the old establishment. He's the new establishment. She's trying to pull him back to the old Republican Party. He's a movement. He's a movement. You're not going to beat a movement with small ball. You're not going to beat a movement by being the thing he beat last time. The way to beat Donald Trump, when you talk to Trump voters, especially the Trump voters who don't like the chaos, who might be open to somebody else, if they convince them, they'd be as tough as Trump on the border. If they convince them, they'd be as good as Trump on the economy. And I know Democrats are saying, what do you mean as good as Trump on the economy? COVID, we had the spike. Republican voters, like it or not, have this nostalgic memory of the pre-COVID Trump economy, where there was no inflation, where if you made $50,000 a year, you could save a little money. You might take the kids to Disneyland. For these people, you take them across the border, Maine. There's a little amusement park, drive from Portsmouth just over the line in Maine, a little amusement park where blue-collar dads take their kids in the summertime. 6% inflation, you can't do that. You can't take them down to Fenway Park. That's what they remember. Inflation during Biden hurt them. Nostalgic memories for pre-Trump. A Republican has to talk to them. You can't pull Trump back. We should be the George W. Bush party. We should be Marco Rubio party. That's not going to work. Trump is a movement, and his people do not want to go back.
Yeah, well, but the bottom line is just the idea that, yes, she represents the old Republican Party, but her campaign is an insurgent campaign, and the odds are against any insurgent campaign. In our lifetimes, we've seen, Donald Trump was an insurgent campaign in 2016. He won. Barack Obama was an insurgent campaign in 2008. He won. But other than those two in the last 20, 25 years, insurgent campaigns tend to lose.
They do. You could argue maybe Bill Clinton. Slide over a minute. We'll make a key point.
I said last 25
Yeah,
years.
right. You're right. Okay, if you go back, if you stretch it back to 30, you could argue Bill Clinton ran as a different kind of Democrat. Didn't last very long. Obama said he was going to redefine the Democratic Party. Is Biden that? Didn't last that long. So, yes, Trump is a movement. The question is, how long does it last? But to the challenge, the Haley campaign is saying, wait, she's going home to South Carolina. Wait, only 2 states have voted. They're absolutely right. They're absolutely right. But maybe David Chalian wants to jump as we go through this here. But, again, only 2.5% of the delegates. We go on to Nevada. This will be a little confusing because there's both a primary and caucuses. Right? The caucuses are where all the delegates are. Donald Trump has the state party of Nevada wired. He's going to get those delegates.
Right, and the Republican governor there who is a Trump supporter, he's, again, Donald Trump is the Republican establishment.
Yes, and so then in South Carolina, all the Republican establishment is with Trump. Let's see if Haley can use that to her advantage. As she says, and she's right, when she came onto the scene in South Carolina, she was running against an establishment that wanted no part of her. When she was governor, she had a lot of fights with Republicans in the legislature. Let's see if she can bring that juice up. Their argument is that's an open primary. Technically, it's open. There's no party registration in South Carolina, but 20 to 25% of the people in the past primaries say they're independents. When you look at that, yes, it's a possibility, but it's not like a New Hampshire electorate. It's a much more conservative.
No, that's where John McCain's insurgent campaign in 2000 went to die.
Right. One more point. Michigan comes next, and then all these other states you get to Super Tuesday. There are a few open primaries in there. Michigan is an open primary. Go to Michigan. Wander around asking Republicans what they think. They think Donald Trump won the 2020 election more than Donald Trump thinks he won the 2020 election.
Let's go to David Chalian with more exit poll information about who was voting today in New Hampshire and what issues were foremost on their mind. David.
Yeah, Jake, just as you and John were talking about, 2 critical issues, the economy and immigration, they rated above all else. Among economy voters, 36% said that was their top issue, the most important issue to their vote. Among those voters, they split 52% for Trump, 46% for Haley. Now, among the voters who say that economic conditions in the country are not good or poor, and by the way, that's nearly 3/4 of the New Hampshire Republican primary electorate, 67% of people who are sour on the economy today, and that's 3/4 of the folks, went with Donald Trump. 31% went for Nikki Haley. On the issue of immigration, 31% of voters said it's their most important issue. It was the number 2 issue on the list for folks today. 77% went for Trump among immigration voters. This is his strength inside the party. 22% went for Nikki Haley. And we asked, what about those who say that undocumented immigrants should be deported in the country, okay? That's 55% of the electorate, so a majority of voters today said they should be deported. Trump wins them 76% to Haley's 24%. This is the strength Trump is going to leave from New Hampshire with and continue to dominate the Republican process. These are the issues he's going to take to Joe Biden as well. Anderson?
All right, David Chalian, thanks very much. Back with the team here in New York. David Axelrod, where does this go?
Well, look, I think the Haley campaign has to go through the stages of grief here. They didn't hit their mark in Iowa and New Hampshire, and they're heading into a really tough situation in her home state. But the pattern of these things is what we saw with Ron DeSantis, which is, you ease into that decision. You don't make it right away. And I think she's going to have, we've mulled over this before. There's a whole month before she gets to her home state. Trump will rack up more delegates in Nevada. And if I were Donald Trump tonight, I know you were asking me about Haley, I would write her right out of the script. I'd congratulate her and all the other candidates for participating, for their efforts, and I would say now it's on to the battle that matters, which is Biden, and just make it clear that she's not really in this anymore.
But what a wild time, just taking a step back. It was basically today, 4 years ago, Donald Trump was leaving Washington, D.C., disgraced. The Capitol riot had taken place. He'd lost to Joe Biden. He gets off on Air Force One, and the entire Republican Party establishment was writing him off. It was time to move on. Fox News had turned on him. And over the course of the last 3.5 years, he has slowly taken back control of the party and proved again, not that slowly, with the indictments, by the way, he has come back as the dominant force in Republican Party politics, and the voters are with him. That's the problem. That's what this comes down to, because as someone, a Republican who can never support him, despite some of us testifying to the Department of Justice, testifying to the January 6th committee, the voters have said, yeah, but we're still going to take a gamble with him. Then we go on to the general election.
It's a great negative partisanship. That is a real thing, right? Like, there are lots of people who are like, I just so don't want the other guy that it's fine. Whatever my guy is doing, and I do hear that with Republicans, with Democrats, like the idea of Biden is so off-putting to them that they're going to forgive anything. Just the same way for you, like the idea of Trump is just something that feels unforgiving. And I think that's becoming a bigger trend.
Yeah, and look, there's no question that partisanship underlies a huge amount of where this election is ultimately going to end up in November. That is certainly true. But I think, you know, to Alyssa's point, and looking even at these numbers that David was just talking about, it's a good reminder that in campaigns, nothing is frozen. Nothing is frozen in time, and you sort of you have a tendency to sort of get into the moment and feel like, you know, the current dynamic is the dynamic that's going to exist. But you know, you had 34% of voters say that the economy was their most important driving issue for them. Well, we don't know what the economy is going to look like in 9 months. We continue to see things moving in the right direction. We continue to see people feeling better about the economy. If the economy is the thing that's driving people's frustration with Biden, well, you know, 6 months from now, 7 months from now, that can look very different. So it's important not to have tunnel vision.
Absolutely true. And the way voters react often lags the statistics. The question for Biden is, will voters give him credit? Right now, there's a dynamic where they blame him for everything that's going wrong, and they say, well, that thing that, you know, yeah, maybe the economy's improving a little, but I don't think he had anything to do with that.
And that'll be look, that will be a challenge, and that's what his campaign will have to do, right? They will have to carve out taking credit for the things that are making people's lives better. That's not easy to do, because the inclination, as you say, is always sort of to lay blame but not assign credit, and that will be a challenge for his campaign.
Yeah. Given that this is going to be a super long general election, apparently, I'm sort of wondering how these two guys are going to wear on. I mean, already, the American people don't want this rematch. I mean, let's just acknowledge that the parties have given us a helping of something off the menu that no one ordered. I mean, everybody said in the polling they wanted something different, and quite easily, both party leaders dispatched, the opposition, and are going to be the nominees. We're going to have a long general election. They're going to fight about the economy. They're going to fight about, and they already don't wear very well with most Americans, and I wonder.
Let's be honest. I mean, you talk about what the job of the Biden campaign, and they do have to have a narrative about where he's leading the country and where Trump would lead the country. But this is going to be trench warfare. Well, and they're going to be spending more time talking about Donald Trump than Joe Biden, and he's going to be spending a lot of time talking about.
Are they
going
to be hiding in trenches? I mean, are they? Is it going to be? Are they going to be on the campaign? What is the campaign going to look like? Yeah. Are there going to be debates?
It is going to be.
Well, I think that's an open question.
If I were Biden, I would stay hidden, and I'll tell you why. He doesn't inspire confidence, and he's not a great messenger for himself. He has done a tremendous job for this economy. Union members, union leaders are racking up win after win. They should be put forward. There are clean energy executives in red states that are putting people to work, and solar, everything. They should There's something wrong with this campaign where we're somehow expecting Joe Biden, who frankly hid during the last campaign, to come out now and be Flash Gordon and save his own campaign. The people who are benefiting from the Biden economy, and they exist, should be empowered to speak.
Boy, I gotta wait. I gotta disagree with that. I mean, I think in 2019 and 2020 there were doubts about whether Biden was the guy who could take on Trump and win. I think Biden ran a very disciplined campaign. I think, you know, the sort of, oh, he hid in the basement. Well, remember, we were in the midst of a global pandemic. We were in the midst of a once-in-a-generation crisis. And frankly, the way Joe Biden handled it was reassuring to people and was a big part of the reason that he was elected president in 2020, because the contrast with Trump and Trump's chaos and Trump's inability to handle this crisis that came down the pike when he was president, you know, it showed people that Joe Biden was the right choice. So the idea that Biden won in spite of himself, that's not borne out by that.
What Van's saying, he was saved of the rigors of a long campaign, and this campaign is going to be lengthy. There's nothing to save him now. They're both out. They're both going to have to be out there.
Have you looked at video of Donald Trump? Do you believe that that's a person who's going to be out and conducting a rigorous campaign around the country every day?
All I can tell you is that I read the same polls you do, and 70 or 80% of Americans don't think Joe Biden has the mental acuity to be president today, let alone for 4 more years.
And you see Donald Trump.
You think the campaign's going to make it better or worse?
I think when you see Donald Trump in the spotlight every day doing things like confusing Nikki Haley, who he's running against with Nancy Pelosi, and uttering sort of nonsensical sentences that don't make sense, yes, I think that is going to raise concerns for people.
You might be right, but it's not a zero-sum argument.
Well, and the problem...
Kate, let me just ask you, the CNN's reporting, some of the White House officials are now moving over to the campaign. What's the significance of that?
Yeah, look, Jen and Mike are both people who are very close to Biden. Mike Donilon has worked for Joe Biden for 40 years and is really his alter ego, is kind of his voice and his political North Star. So, you know, to me, as somebody who has obviously worked on that team very closely, it's not a surprise that Mike Donilon and Jen would ultimately end up in the campaign. They are the people who fundamentally make the political decisions, make the operational decisions. They have been in the White House where they have had other responsibilities. We've now come into the general election. They're going to the campaign to focus all of their energy there. I think that's a good thing for Joe Biden, to have people who he trusts, who he knows, who are going to take the reins of an operation that's been building over 2023, that has done good work. And so for them, I think this is the right time. And it is just I think it shows, again, we're at the starting gun of the general election. That's how the Biden campaign's thinking about it, and these moves underscore that.
I think a lot of folks, Democratic operatives and so on, would say these are really good moves, because this can be a really tough campaign, and it's hard to do 2 jobs at once.
Absolutely.
They both had responsibilities in the White House. Hers were quite extensive administratively. They need their 100% presence in that campaign and interacting with the various elements of the campaign. But to your other point, I have said this many times, I think Joe Biden has done some really extraordinary things, and that history will shine on those. But his performance is a problem, and that is reflected in the polls. And what it translates into is an image of weakness. Whether that image is deserved or not, given all that he's dealt with, is a different question. But that is the reality. There is a sense that the world's out of control and he's not in command. And that is what Trump is going straight at. And that is what they have to defeat in this campaign. And they need a counter narrative. And it isn't, I'm a great president, he was a lousy president. It's like, this guy is consumed by his past. He's not focused on you. Our guy is every day earnestly trying to do things to help. It's not to put up a mission accomplished banner.
Donald Trump is speaking now. Let's listen.
We win it every time. We win the primary. We win the generals. We've won it, and it's a very, very special place to me. It's very important. If you remember, in 2016, we came here and we needed that win, and we won by 21 points, and it was great. And today, I have to tell you, it was very interesting, because I said, wow, what a great victory. But then somebody ran up to the stage all dressed up nicely when it was at 7. But now I just walked up and it's at 14. But she ran up when it was 7. And, you know, we have to do what's good for our party. And she was up and I said, wow, she's doing like a speech like she won. She didn't win, she lost. And, you know, last week we had a little bit of a problem, and if you remember, Ron was very upset because she ran up and she pretended she won Iowa. And I looked around, I said, didn't she come in 3rd? Yeah, she came in 3rd. And then I looked at the polls. She was talking about most winnability, who's going to win, and I had one put up. I don't know if you see it, but I have one put up. We've won almost every single poll in the last 3 months against crooked Joe Biden, almost every poll. And she doesn't win those polls. And she doesn't win those. This is not your typical victory speech, but let's not have somebody take a victory when she had a very bad night. She had a very bad night. And you have the now very unpopular governor of this state. This guy, he's got to be on something. I've never seen anybody with energy. He's like hopscotch. And, you know, I'm watching this guy, and 2 weeks ago he said, we're going to win in the landslide, we're going to win. About 3 days ago he started saying, well, we want to do well. That's a big difference. But I walked out just now, we're 14 points up, and I don't know what it's going to be. But when she was up here, it was like 6 or 7. And, you know, with like 7% of the vote counted. Now, let me just tell you, we had an unbelievable week last week in Iowa. We set a record. It was the best in the history of the caucus, in the history. And I remember I sort of had the same feeling. I'm up and I'm watching, and I said, she's taking a victory lap. And we beat her so badly. She was, but Ron beat her also. You know, Ron came in second and he left. She came in third and she's still hanging around. The other thing, she only got 25% of the Republican votes. I don't know if you saw that. Tremendous numbers of independents came out because in this state, because you have a governor that doesn't frankly know what the hell he's doing in this state, in the Republican primary, they accept Democrats to vote. In fact, I think they had 4,000 Democrats before October 6th. They already voted. Now, they're only voting because they want to make me look as bad as possible. Because if you remember, we won in 2016. And if you really remember, and if you want to play it straight, we also won in 2020. By more. And we did much better in 2020 than we did in 2016. But as they said, we lost by a whisker, just by a whisker. No. But we can't let that happen. You know, you have to have people that speak up. I said, I can go up and I can say to everybody, oh, thank you for the victory. It's wonderful. Or I can go up and say, who the hell was the imposter that went up on the stage before and, like, claimed a victory? She did very poorly, actually. She had to win. The governor said, she's going to win, she's going to win, she's going to win. Then she failed badly. Now, I have here, if he promises to do it in a minute or less, but the only person more angry than, let's say me, but I don't get too angry, I get even. The only person... because he was there, and he did fantastically well, by the way, and then he endorsed me. And we don't have to talk about Tim Scott, who, by the way, just got engaged, we have to tell you. And that's more important than all of this stuff. But a man that got to know her very well is Vivek. I said, Vivek. I said, Vivek, go up and say a few words about it. He has to do it in 1 minute or less, and then we're going to just say, we had one hell of a night tonight. And one other thing, before Vivek comes, do you see that poll? We're going to put it up. We have beaten Biden. You could almost say, who can't? Who the hell can't? The man can't put two sentences together. He can't find the stairs off a stage. Who can't? But Vivek, 1 minute or less. Go do it, Vivek.
What we saw tonight is America first defeating America last. That's what we saw tonight. If you want America last, you can go to Joe Biden. You got another candidate still apparently in the Republican primary. Cut your Social Security to fork over more money to Ukraine so some kleptocrat can buy a bigger house. Go to Nikki Haley. But you know who delivered a double-digit victory tonight? It is a double-digit victory as of right now, is this man, Donald J. Trump, the leader of America First. And that means something. Now, USA and Donald Trump, America first. Now, I got 30 seconds left. I want to make this point here, okay? We got to say this. We got to say this right. What we see right now with her continuing in this race is the ugly underbelly of American politics, where the mega donors are trying to do one thing when we, the people, say another. And it's up to us, to we, the people, to at long last say, hell no. We, the people, create a government that is accountable to us. And we, the people, have said tonight we want, again, as we did in Iowa, Donald J. Trump. And so you want to actually speak truth. That's the truth tonight. And the only thing they're rooting for is an ugly thing that we don't want to see happen. That's what these people are rooting for, is playing to say long enough so the Reid Hoffmans and the ugly Democratic George Soros Jr.'s who are funding the lawsuits against Trump can prop up their puppet. We say no to that vision. I say the general election begins tonight, and this man will win it in a landslide. God bless you, Donald J. Trump. Vote Trump, USA.
Very nice. Wasn't that nice? So, this was a great evening, and I want to thank everybody in the audience, and I want to thank the people that are standing behind me. You know, I think we called it right. Immigration's a big deal, a very big deal. We have millions and millions of people flowing into our country illegally. We have no idea who the hell they are. They come from prisons, and they come from mental institutions, and it's just killing our country. And I'm talking about millions and millions and millions. They are drug dealers. They're everybody. And they come in just like walking right through. There's nobody to check, and there's nobody to vet. And we have a man with us tonight, Tom Homan, who is central casting. He's central casting. And I'd like you to say a few words about the border and who's going to solve that problem and how quick are we going to do it, Tom? Go ahead, please.
All right, Donald Trump, former President Trump, giving the mic to a second person in his victory celebration this evening. The first one was former Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy, who served as something of a hype man for Donald Trump. I haven't seen anything like that since Bundini Brown used to do it for Muhammad Ali back in the 70s.
Wow.
I'm dating myself. You like that? I want to bring in, it was the cornerman for Ali. He came up with float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. Anyway, moving on. Let's bring in Daniel Dale because I heard at least 2 or 3 things that need fact-checking. Daniel Dale, obviously, to start with the obvious, Donald Trump did not win in 2020. He lost that election, and that's been adjudicated over and over again. Although to the crowd he was speaking to, they believe it, even though it's a lie.
It's a lie. We've done it over and over, as you said. He also made a more specific false claim about elections. He said he's always won New Hampshire, not only in primaries, which he has, but in every general election. That's wrong, too, Jake. He lost New Hampshire in the 2016 general election to Democrat Hillary Clinton, lost it again in the 2020 general election to Joe Biden, so completely untrue. He also claimed, Jake, something he's been saying in the lead up to this primary, and that is that Democrats were able to vote. In fact, only registered Republicans and people registered as undeclared, so New Hampshire independents, were permitted to cast ballots in the Republican primary. The deadline to switch your affiliation was more than 3 months ago, in early October. So no, Democrats, registered Democrats, were not voting in this election. And one more thing, Jake, I heard him say that people are flooding in from mental institutions across the border. I asked Trump's campaign for evidence of this claim, which he says at pretty much every rally. Find me some source, some anything to suggest that foreign countries are emptying their mental institutions, as he's claiming, to send people across the border as migrants. His own campaign could not find a single shred of evidence.
All right. Daniel Dale, if we'd run the whole speech, maybe you would have had more to do, but I appreciate
I'm sure I would have, yeah.
Your yeoman's work, and I hope you're back from paternity leave and ready to get to work, because we're going to have a lot to fact check in 2024. And Aaron, I think, one of the things that's interesting about Donald Trump's performance this evening is he's mad. He's angry. That was not a celebratory Trump. He's angry that Nikki Haley is still in the race. Right. He was insulting her. He was insulting voters of New Hampshire. He was insulting the process of the primary system there, which has been going on for, back. It was going the same way back when Donald Trump was a Democrat. He went after the governor. This is not gracious, Donald Trump. I'm going to be the nominee. Come, let us all come together and heal. This is, I am furious. Where's my hype man to do even more attacks against?
The people arrayed behind him and the whole, even as what's interesting is he did better than his own campaign had set the expectations.
Oh, he did great. He should be in a good mood.
Right. Kristen Holmes was saying they expected it to be, 7 points, which was a spin to say that, oh, wow, if it's close, 7 points is a win. Yeah. Right now, as everything's still being finalized, you're looking at something certainly in the double digits, Abby. So he should be feeling good. But as Jake said, that's not the tone.
Add Nikki Haley to the roster of people standing behind him who he defeated. Yeah. There's a reason that they're all there. The Vivek Ramaswamis and the Tim Scotts and whoever else. Trump wants to show his dominance, to prove it to voters, and to have people come and kiss the ring. And the fact that Nikki Haley has not done that yet is a problem for him. But I will say, Nikki Haley and her campaign, they're going to be huddling probably every day until that decision is made. And in the meantime, all of the people around her know Trump's mood tonight, and they see his anger, and they do not want to be on the other side of Donald Trump if he is inevitably, as he looks like he might be, the nominee to the Republican Party. That is going to be a huge pressure point for Nikki Haley as people try to not be the last person to cross the line over to the Trump column.
But compare the split screen of what we just watched to what we saw last week coming out of Iowa. I mean, those are the two different Donald Trumps. He came out of Iowa like 2016, the happiest that I've probably ever seen him give a speech, when he came out and realized that he didn't have to worry about Ron DeSantis anymore, that Nikki Haley obviously came in third in that race. And tonight his fury was obvious, the fact that she is not getting out of this race immediately. She could get out before South Carolina happens. We don't know. But it was palpable just how angry he was in that speech. And one thing he said that she was like an imposter who came out and claimed victory when she did not win in New Hampshire. Who does that sound like? Who has claimed victory before in a race that they did not win?
But also, that's not even true. She congratulated him. She congratulated him for winning.
She came out very graciously and early on in her speech.
But look, her biting criticism clearly got under his skin. I mean, the way that she mocked him for confusing her with Nancy Pelosi and questioned his mental competency. And this is precisely why so many Republicans, even those who don't want Donald Trump to win the nomination, but now recognize that he is on his way to do that, want this to be over. Because the longer this goes on, the more the back and forth this happens, the longer, and it gives the Biden campaign an opening to go after Trump while Trump is battling this two-phase war.
But I also think Nikki Haley is different because something about her in the last several weeks and how she's polled, especially in New Hampshire, and the fact that she's someone who worked in his administration, she's gotten under his skin in a way that the other challengers have not to the same degree. I mean, look at Tim Scott, who is standing right behind Donald Trump tonight after he endorsed him in recent days, right before, just as a dig to Nikki Haley. But I think it goes back to how Trump is viewing this. And yes, it also questions her strategy of dealing with Trump going forward, because she was so gracious when she came out. She had some mild criticism of him. I would not say it's very strong, but it does raise the question of what the next several weeks are going to look like.
Well, I disagree with you, because I agree with Manu. She basically said he wasn't mentally fit. I mean, there's no two ways about it.
She just said earlier today that he was.
She and Nancy Pelosi, it's hard to tell the
difference.
She
just said today that he was fit for president when Dana asked her, though.
Well, no, I understand that, but I'm just saying, like, she said Donald Trump couldn't tell me and Nancy Pelosi apart. I've said anybody over 75 should have a mental competency test. He says that he would beat me in that. Let's see him have a debate. This is all personal to him. I'm not justifying his anger or his I am vengeance routine, but I'm just saying, like, I can understand why he'd be upset. Well, I'm being told I need to throw it to Dana Bash in Manchester.
Thanks, Jake. Just picking up where they left off, I've never seen a victor so angry about it.
Talk about grabbing defeat out of the jaws of victory. You know, it was so interesting. We were listening earlier, one of the other panels, David Axelrod was saying, if I were doing this, I would just I'd ignore Nikki Haley and I'd say, I'm the nominee. And
shockingly, he's not taking David Axelrod's advice.
Not taking the high road.
No. But the other interesting thing is, I talked to some of the Trump people today. Yeah. That's exactly what they intended to do, to say, tonight, I am the nominee, and it's Joe Biden and me on. And clearly, he couldn't do it. Now, maybe after we cut away from it, he did that. but people are going to remember the top of the speech where he was clearly upset about Nikki. I mean, who the heck was that imposter who came on the stage?
Yeah.
That's a line that'll go down in Trump lore.
Casey, as I bring you in, I got a text from somebody in Haley Land. If they aren't concerned about her, why do they keep talking about her?
Yeah, I got a note from someone else in Haley World who called the Trump speech weird, nasty, and angry. You know, which to Chris's point, I mean, this is an opportunity for any normal candidate. You would expect them to take David Axelrod's advice exactly. And obviously, this, I think, is evidence that Donald Trump really can't let it go. I've also never seen a candidate in that kind of an environment invite other people to talk. I thought that was particularly, and is he going to use Vivek Ramaswamy as a particular attack dog against Nikki Haley because of the things he was willing to say on the debate stage that are not generally considered to be acceptable in our discourse? Not that that's ever bothered Trump before, but I mean, look, this is what we're in for here for the next however many months.
And we're about to get the South Carolina version because as we've seen here in New Hampshire, there's been a parade of South Carolina Republicans here. Tim Scott was standing behind him there, but Governor McMaster obviously is a big supporter. Congresswoman Nancy Mace will obviously play a big role in this. But I was struck by also what you said, Chris, not by pivoting to the general, because right here in New Hampshire, this is a battleground state.
Yep.
And despite what he said, the people of New Hampshire know that he lost this state twice. He lost it in 2016 narrowly to Hillary Clinton, and he lost it again by about 8 points to Joe Biden in 2020. They know that. So this is a state that he will need should he become the nominee. So certainly missed that opportunity to be gracious. But I think going forward, again, talking to more Haley advisors, because the story of tonight is we've all seen many of these campaigns. As David and others were saying, it's impossible to make a decision in the moment like this. They are still going to see how the donors' support is going to be overnight. And perhaps that Trump speech might help it.
You know what, Jeff?
That might help it. And still the margin is still coming out. So let's see what the morning brings. She's still flying to Charleston. She has a rally in North Charleston tomorrow. And he may have just egged her on a bit.
You know, it's funny you say that because another text that I got from somebody who is affiliated with one of her super PACs said exactly that, that this speech by Donald Trump will help, perhaps help, but they're hoping it will help. They'll certainly send out some mailers to try to goose the money to come in, the donations to her to maybe keep her going a little bit longer.
You know, talking about the general election tomorrow, I mean, a lot of people thought that after the victory, the general election by Trump in New Hampshire, the general election will begin tomorrow, 286 days. And, you know, clearly it's not the general election yet. He's going to battle, I mean, whether he needs to or not, he's clearly going to keep battling Nikki Haley. But, you know, the Biden-Trump general election, I mean, we're talking about the better part of a year. And I don't remember any general election that started this early.
It's the longest. The second was, I believe, March 3rd of 2004 with John Kerry and George W. Bush. This is more than a month and a week longer than that.
Isn't that exciting and something to look forward to?
It is.
This is
How many days did you say?
286 days tomorrow till
and
election
it's only
day.
going to feel like 286 years.
And just keep in mind that everyone in the country, it seems, according to our polls, is dreading that, right? I mean, this is going to be the kind of slog. And the Biden team, I mean, you're already seeing them try to tell people, to get people, they're counting on people being afraid of Donald Trump becoming president again, right? They're trying to, even more than Donald Trump himself, say that Donald Trump has won this nomination tonight and how they're approaching things so that they can try to get that underway.
So many uncertainties, though. I mean, for all the talk about the 286 days, think of all the things that could happen, the court cases, other things. So perhaps there's a bit of deflection there in the former president's speech as well. I mean, a lot of deflection, as always. He was supposed to be back in court tomorrow. That's not happening, apparently, because of a sick juror again. But he'll spend a lot of those days in court. So we may think we know sort of the makeup of the general election now. We'll see. We'll see what Nikki Haley does. But we have no idea what's to happen in terms of the all the uncertainties hanging over both of these candidates.
I mean, we were joking about the fact that it is early and about the fact that a lot of people in this country are saying, oh my gosh, could this be happening again? But it is so incredibly important. And people are going to be paying, if they're disgusted or not, you know, we'll see what happens. But they are going to hopefully feel how critically important this is going to be over the next year.
Well, and I think, you know, one of the numbers that came out of Iowa, and we saw a little bit of it, it's flipped around in New Hampshire, but that number of people who think that Donald Trump is going to be disqualified if he's convicted on one of these things. I continue to believe that when you look at that number, it means that the imperative for Donald Trump as a candidate, if he wants to win the presidency again, is to cut down institutions to the point that there is no credibility in a conviction. You've seen him do it effectively with his own base, and I do think it just, presages a very ugly general election season.
Okay, well, Donald Trump is closer to a rematch with Joe Biden tonight. We're going to look ahead to that potential race that we've been talking about here and how strongly Nikki Haley's argument that both men are too old resonates with voters. We'll be back in a moment.
And I have a key race alert for you now. Let's check in on the big board. 44% of the estimated vote in from the Republican New Hampshire primary. Donald Trump is still ahead, 54.4% of the vote. He has 78,575 votes. That's about 15,000 more votes than Nikki Haley, who is in second place in a two-person race with 43.9% of the vote. Donald Trump has about a 10-point lead on Nikki Haley as of right now. Let's go to the White House right now, where MJ Lee has the Biden camp's reaction to Trump's victory and what happens next. MJ, the statement put out by the campaign manager suggested that they think the Republican race is over.
Yeah, very much over. And in fact, they made it very clear that Nikki Haley's decision to stay in the Republican race is basically a non-factor for them. They said that they are full steam ahead to the general election. But one senior Democrat that I was just talking to said that the Biden campaign could see it as basically welcome news that Haley is going to stick around for longer because presumably she's going to stay in the race and continue attacking Trump and force him to keep spending money while the Biden campaign can obviously exclusively focus on the general election. One other thing that I think is just worth noting is that even as of earlier today, the official line from the Biden campaign was that they were prepared to run against any Republican candidate, whether that is Donald Trump or Nikki Haley. And when it comes to Haley, the Biden campaign and the DNC, they've had opposition research on her well before starting when she even officially got into the race about a year ago. But after tonight, I think that's not a line that we are going to be hearing from the Biden campaign. They have made it so crystal clear that they are just squarely focused on Donald Trump right now. So that Nikki Haley opposition research binder, I think the Biden campaign is making very clear tonight that they are ready to set that aside.
All right, MJ Lee at the White House for us. Anderson?
Jake, thanks. Back with the team here in New York. Scott, if you were advising the Trump campaign, what for the next 100 days the general election look like?
I was just thinking about what to do next. If Haley does go through with this, would I actually pay any attention to her or not in South Carolina? I mean, it's probably true she'll have some support in her home state. He's employed two different strategies so far. In Iowa, he focused almost exclusively with his ads on Biden. But in New Hampshire, he hammered Nikki Haley and went after her personally. So I think what they decide to do in South Carolina will be telling. But if
that seemed to be the strategy tonight.
Well, and obviously they weren't listening to Axe.
I think he went out before I got to
speak. To follow up on what MJ was saying, maybe the Biden folks aren't going to be paying attention to her. We just heard Trump further along in that speech talking about getting even, making innuendo about there's some things in her past that won't come out. We've seen him talk like this before.
He's
and this is, this is also the version of him we'll all start to remember, right? The one who is speaking exclusively about retribution, innuendos that are unproven, and even saying things like, Daniel Dale fact-checked about winning elections you did not win. I think some of this is going to start to jog the memory of a lot of voters.
I mean, the question is your irritation going to get in the way of better judgment about what is the correct pivot to the general election here? And
it wouldn't be an unprecedented thing if his irritation got the better of him. But, can I just say one thing about the Biden White House statement? No, I think they do want to run against Donald Trump because he's a deeply flawed candidate. He probably would welcome the statement they put out tonight because basically what they're saying is, or maybe it was just what they said to MJ, but to basically say, yeah, we'd like her to stay in because she's gonna dirty him up for one more round, and that helps us, is probably the same argument that Republican officials are going to be making about why she should get out of the race.
Well, and that's exactly it. You're going to start hearing from more and more Republicans who are going to say she's helping Joe Biden by going after Donald Trump and continuing this race. But here's the reality. We're back in hell. We're having the race most likely that most Americans didn't want. 6 in 10 did not want the Trump versus Biden rematch. And I do think that Trump, he's the most undisciplined politician I've ever worked for. He does not take guidance. And despite having actually a fairly professional team right now, he's going to get out there and he's going to remind us why he's exhausting, why he's vengeance-driven, why he's backward-looking. And that is the best thing for Joe Biden because Joe Biden is a historically weak candidate right now. His numbers rival Jimmy Carter's after he didn't win re-election. So what we're basically seeing is a race for who is more tolerable at this point. I don't see vision on either side. I don't see people trying to bring in coalitions. It's basically going to be hold your nose and who are you going to
Let me just play what Nikki Haley said, part of her speech tonight.
Most Americans do not want a rematch between Biden and Trump. The first party to retire its 80-year-old candidate is going to be the party that wins this election.
I like that line, and I do think it's a long shot for her, but still, right now, the main barrier between Donald Trump and the White House is somebody named Nikki Haley and somebody named Joe Biden. That's what it is. And so if she wants to stay in this race, I don't think we should beat her up too bad for it. I think she's doing the country a service to keep this conversation going. I do think more and more he looks like a coward, not being willing to even debate her. And I'm watching the Republican Party do the opposite of what the Democratic Party did 4 years ago. We had somebody in our party, Bernie Sanders, who was an outside-the-box threat to the establishment of our party. We cleared the field to make sure we had a normal Democrat, Joe Biden, ready to go. This Republican Party is doing the reverse. They have cleared the field to make sure that Donald Trump is going to be the heir apparent. They cleared somebody who's got 91 felonies, somebody who led an insurrection against our country, somebody who cannot tell the truth if you paid him to do it. And you are literally seeing the Republican Party clear the field for him. Everybody's now going to stand up and kiss the ring. There is one Republican in this country still standing up against him. Her name is Nikki Haley, and I'm proud of her.
Well, the question, Van, is she remembered in the last 48 hours before the primary a bunch of stuff that she realized were deficient in Donald Trump. For the longest time in this campaign, she tried to soft pedal that. And even now, some of the things that are most egregious about a man who is currently awaiting trial for trying to overturn a free and fair election, she won't talk about that stuff. So, she tries to split the thing that's been a problem.
She found it because there's an audience in New Hampshire that can come into this primary and respond to it. She will now forget it, I assume, because the future map doesn't contain that same audience.
Yeah.
I mean, look at what happened with the Republicans.
Yeah. Nikki Haley pledging to stay in the race despite losing the first head-to-head matchup with the Republican presidential race coming up. We'll speak with a key Trump endorser from her home state about that decision, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott.
Donald Trump, the clear winner of the New Hampshire Republican presidential primary this evening. The former president tightening his hold on his party with what is currently a double-digit lead over his only major Republican opponent now, Nikki Haley, 47% of the vote in. Donald Trump up with 54.4% of the vote, 84,802 votes. Roughly 17,000 votes ahead of Nikki Haley, who has 43.6% of the vote. He's a double-digit lead. Trump spoke to supporters about his win just a short while ago in New Hampshire, sounding less celebratory than furious at Nikki Haley after her vow to stay in the race.
I can go up and I can say to everybody, oh, thank you for the victory. It's wonderful. Or I can go up and say, who the hell was the imposter that went up on the stage before and, claimed a victory? She did very poorly, actually. She had to win. The governor said, she's going to win, she's going to win, she's going to win. Then she failed badly.
Nikki Haley didn't claim victory. She, in fact, congratulated Trump on winning. But she did also continue her attacks on Trump, warning voters of his many liabilities in a potential rematch with Joe Biden.
With Donald Trump, you have one bout of chaos after another. this court case, that controversy, this tweet, that senior moment. You can't fix Joe Biden's chaos with Republican chaos.
Let's check in with Kristen Holmes, who's at Trump headquarters in Nashua. Kristen, Donald Trump was mad, clearly.
Yeah, Jake, he was very mad. I mean, this is a completely different speech and a completely different Donald Trump than what we saw in Iowa. In Iowa, he took the stage, he was beaming, he said that he had won by such a huge margin, that it was time to unite the party, time to unite the country. And this was an angry Donald Trump who focused all of his rage on Nikki Haley. I mean, earlier in the day, he said he didn't care if she stayed in the race. He said he would never call on anyone to leave the race and that he didn't view her as a threat. But it was clear that he was not only annoyed, but angry that she didn't drop out of the race. He was angry that she seemed so celebratory in her speech, and I'm not sure celebratory is the right word, but at least defiant, didn't cower down, didn't back down, and said that she would continue fighting. He also actually at one point looked at Tim Scott, senator from South Carolina, and said, "You must really hate her to endorse me." In what was kind of an awkward moment, Scott walked over to the microphone and said, "No, I just love you," but obviously inferring there that because they worked together in South Carolina and Scott backed Trump, that he didn't like Nikki Haley. And I will say that that's been a part of their long-term strategy, not just with Nikki Haley, but also with Ron DeSantis, which is kind of trying to humiliate their opponent, not just fight them in a battle over policy or issues, but to actually destroy them. If you remember with Ron DeSantis, they had a coordinated effort that Ron DeSantis came to Washington, asked the Florida delegation not to do anything, not to endorse, and they had a strategy to get every single one of them, or most of them, to endorse Trump the day he was in Washington. Then, here in New Hampshire, right before the primary, they had a number of South Carolina lawmakers endorsing Haley and going out and stumping for Donald Trump, one of them being South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. So this is clearly a strategy, and they are going to continue doing it. But yes, tonight was a very angry Donald Trump, not focused at all on the fact that he won New Hampshire and possibly by double digits, which is what they had hoped for, but instead focused on the fact that Nikki Haley was still in the race.
Kristen Holmes at Trump headquarters in Nashua. Thanks. Let's pop over to Concord, where Kylie Atwood is covering the Haley campaign. Well, Kylie, Nikki Haley, at least you could say she succeeded in getting under Donald Trump's skin. But beyond that, what's the path to victory in her home state of South Carolina, where, according to polls, Donald Trump is up double digits?
Yeah, well, getting under Donald Trump's skin is exactly the point that Haley campaign aides are making tonight. They're calling his attacks on her nasty. They're saying if he isn't concerned about her, why does he keep talking about her? They clearly are trying to make the case that she still presents a threat to him, and he believes that that is the case. Of course, we're still waiting to see, what the final margin here in New Hampshire looks like, how much former President Trump will have beat her by, because that will be a decisive data point as they chart their path forward. One interesting thing is that I was speaking with some volunteers here at campaign headquarters who I've seen in Iowa for Nikki Haley. I've seen them here in New Hampshire for Nikki Haley, and one of them said to me that they're going to have to go back to their day job now. They were exasperated, talking about the fact that, if she's not able to win in either of these early contests, they're not sure that they can continue giving so much time and energy to this campaign. And it will be a challenge as the campaign and Nikki Haley herself are trying to say that there is a future here. They are going to keep competing. I talked to another campaign aide who acknowledged that it's going to be hard for them to build up their teams in these future states just because the results here don't demonstrate that she is all that competitive with former President Trump.
All right, Kylie Atwood in Concord, New Hampshire, covering the Haley campaign. Let's walk over now to my friend John King, because, John, what we're focused on now is the rest of the 52% of the vote comes in. The majority of the vote still not in is the margin. Right now, Donald Trump is up about 11 points. Can Haley narrow that chasm?
Yes, I would not place a bet on her narrowing it very significantly. Can she narrow it? Yes. How so? You look at the lower part, the southern part of the state here, you see a little mix. There's about half and half right along the bottom, a little more Trump than Haley. But in places where, I'm going to give you Portsmouth, for example, it's a small number of votes here, but she's getting 60% here, right? And she's getting, 54, 55% of the vote here. If these areas around there where you have similar voters come in about the same, they're not huge, right? Look, that's 200 votes. That's 200 votes. You get even here, it's even less than that. But it works for Nikki Haley just as it works for Donald Trump. When he runs it up in small places, it helps offset what happens. So there's an opportunity down here, and she's getting a smattering of the smaller. These are the more rural counties up here. Your people in Hanover have yet to report votes, and that's a possible place for her. It's a place John Kasich did well, 4 years ago. That's
how big is Hanover?
Right. So you bring it up here, and so you're looking at 26. So it's in the top 10% of the 260 townships. They're all pretty small. So if you want to go back in time and take a peek at it. Again,
John Kasich country.
Yeah, Kasich country, about with fewer than 700 votes. So you're talking about, as we come back out and come back to where we are now, is can she narrow the lead? Yes. Will she? Trump's going to fill in a lot up here, a lot small. So she has to do it down here. One place, let's see, we talked about Nashua earlier. That was a Haley target. It's in. Right? So it's in. Trump's going to win Nashua. There's a little more votes to come in there. But that's opportunity lost if you're thinking about a week or so, 10 days or so, when they really thought they could win, where they thought they had momentum, and then it sort of plateaued out. This would have been someplace they needed to win. Still waiting. Hollis next door. This is a chance. 38 out of 260s in terms of population. Again, these are all small population centers. This is on the Haley target list. So you go across the southern part of the state. There are still some places, but let's just be honest with what we're seeing right here. Right now, Donald Trump's at 55. If you round that up, right, it's a 12-point race right now, just shy of a 12-point race right now. Again, you can make the argument that people are making that, well, he's Donald Trump, he was president, he should be getting 60%. Look at that map right there. He won Iowa, he won New Hampshire. That's rare.
Yeah.
That's rare. That doesn't happen much. So Donald Trump has taken us again to a place that we either have never been or very rarely been, because that's what he does. And so now the question is, where?
Right.
Where? And that margin will help with that. It will help more with donors. You can't go to a voter and say, be for me, Donald Trump beat me by 8 points, not 12 points. It doesn't work that way. Helps you with donors maybe to say, please, I'm getting closer. I'm closer here than I was in Iowa.
Sure.
Give me another shot or two. Okay, maybe.
Yeah. Can you name, and I don't have the answer to this trivia question, but you would know it if anyone. When's the last time a Republican non-incumbent won Iowa and New Hampshire? Do you know? I can't think of a time that they did. I mean, in terms of the achievement that Donald Trump has made here.
Right. She was right when she said, and it probably hurt her a little bit in Iowa, when she said at that New Hampshire event just before Iowa, New Hampshire corrects Iowa. That has been the tradition. Even, George W. Bush wins in Iowa, John McCain comes back and stands up in New Hampshire. Bush goes on to win the nomination, win the presidency. But the two states have had, call it a competition. New Hampshire's had a contrarian sort of way of saying, not thank you, Iowa, but we do something. And to that point, it does get you to where we're going. This is the state that traditionally, especially in Republican politics, and I just said traditionally, maybe we throw that out the window. Although, as you pointed out, when this came up a week or so ago, Trump has the establishment there now. But Donald
Trump is the establishment.
This was always the state, that said, thank you, people who live up there in the Republican, but we pick nominees. You winnow the field. You tell Iowa go away and winnow the field more, and we pick nominees. That has traditionally, again, does tradition apply anymore in the Trump era? South Carolina has been that place. So if Nikki Haley's going to do it, okay, do it there. However, again, Donald Trump won South Carolina. The field was still big. Everybody stayed. In 2016, remember, it was the disbelief.
Right.
This can't be real.
Right.
He's not a Republican.
Right.
This cannot happen. Wait, what's going on? Well, this is where Donald Trump proved, yeah, it's happening. Because look what I did. Now, you see Columbia, that's Marco Rubio. That's the state capital. See out here on the coast, the Charleston area, that's Marco Rubio. Everything else was Donald Trump. So now Nikki Haley's going home. Who was she with in 2016? Marco Rubio. Right, and so does she? Is there a place to
Who is with Trump?
Who is with Trump? Who is with Trump now? Exactly. Yeah. And Rubio got 20. I mean, again, more candidates. Trump only got 32% or 33% if you round up. But can she do it here? Okay, but
remember also back in 2016 there was this argument because the field had winnowed a little bit at this point. I guess Jeb was still in the race at this point?
On the ballot.
Okay. But in any case, there was this argument from people who wanted to defeat Donald Trump. Rubio and Cruz, you need to get together, and the together one of you president, one of you vice president, you can defeat Donald Trump. They could never agree on who would be top of the ticket. Now, because the argument always was, you just need to consolidate the race. Well, now the Republicans have that. They have a consolidated race. It's just 1 versus 1. And Donald Trump is romping.
And that is what happens. You got now, again, you bring up that this is what happens since he came down that escalator in 2015. Every time he does something that frustrates them, there's another conversation among the anti-Trump forces. So their conversation the other day was, we got the one-on-one. Now the conversation is, okay, what? We got the one-on-one, and she's, whatever this ends up in the end, but her home is South Carolina. This is what Donald Trump has done to the anti-Trump Republicans. Since he came down that escalator. They just, every week, they come up with a new, well, where's the trap door? They keep waiting for the trap door. Not tonight.
Aaron Burnett, back to you.
All right, Jake. So, Manu, I'm just looking at the dates, okay? There's a really important date coming up, and it's not Nevada, caucus primary, Michigan, not South Carolina. It's actually a week from tonight, January 30th. 4 guys worth $26 billion combined are holding a fundraiser for Nikki Haley. Okay, it's been announced. Now, Stanley Druckenmiller, he's not looking to support Trump, but you got people like Ken Langone, who's already said he would if he needed to. Henry Kravis. I mean, that is putting up the decision time for her, right? You do so much looking at the money.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if something like that doesn't happen the way she needs it, she just hits an end very quickly.
Yeah, it's really about that. I mean, if the money still continues to pour in, if they feel like there is some reason for her to continue the campaign, they will. The Super PAC is indicating it will continue to support her in the weeks ahead. We'll see if that changes, if her calculation changes. The real risk for Trump, if this continues on, even if he's on a march to the nomination, is that he needs... Tonight demonstrated that, yes, he is strong with Republican voters, but he's weak with moderate voters. He's weak with the voters that he will need in swing states to win an election. 88% of Haley supporters said they would be dissatisfied with him if he were the nominee. Those are the voters that he has to eventually win back if he's a nominee. So the longer this goes on, the shorter time he has to repair the damage that he has caused to that key voting bloc.
Can I make a separate point about something that Trump said after we cut away from his speech tonight, which is he was saying that Nikki Haley is not going to win, in his view, the nomination. But even if she did, he claimed that she would be under investigation within 15 minutes. And he said that Ron DeSantis would as well, but he noted that Ron DeSantis got out of this race. Obviously, those are baseless claims. But I think the point that Trump is trying to make there, as he has tried to downplay the many investigations into him, which his opponents have also done. Ron DeSantis did it many times. Nikki Haley has done it many times. She cited Trump and Biden's investigations, even though if you compare the two, obviously they don't stack up. And I think that is a consequence of the GOP rivals against Trump in this race failing to talk about his investigations and what they mean. They've kind of dismissed it as the Biden Justice Department and the deep state and all of the stuff that's happening inside the Justice Department. But as a consequence of not really talking about it, Trump uses his victory speech tonight, if that's what we're calling it, to try to turn it around and say that any Republican would be investigated, when we obviously know the investigations and the charges that are leveled at Donald Trump are highly specific to him and taking classified documents and election subversion. But he is trying to turn it into saying it's something that would happen to any Republican candidate. And I wonder how Nikki Haley and those campaigns respond to that. I will say I did hear from a person close to the Haley campaign who responded to Trump's speech saying if they're not concerned about her, why do they keep talking about her? Obviously, that's the campaign, but I do think it's a good point that speech showed just how much she is under his skin.
Abby?
Yeah, I mean, I think she certainly is. The only caveat to all of this is that even while Trump is sort of not at universal support yet with Republicans, I think history shows us that he will be near at universal support if he is the nominee. The Republican Party has proven, by and large, that they are willing to come home to Donald Trump, despite the investigations, despite his conduct, despite how he behaves, what he says about his opponents, the innuendo. That part, I think, is less of a problem. It's more of a problem with the rest of the electorate. All the other people who are watching this, the actual independent voters out there, who are watching this and think it's kind of wild. And at the end of the day, Trump is not only going to be who he is, he's doubling down on all the very things that give voters pause about him. I'm not sure that we are going to really see that bear out in this Republican primary. But once we start talking about the broader American electorate, that's going to be the pivot point for him. And all of this stuff suggesting that his investigations are nothing, that does not play beyond Republican voters who are already inclined to believe that he and Republicans in general are being targeted by the state. Once you get beyond those GOP voters, those right-leaning voters, that stuff becomes much less salient, and that's where he's in trouble, really.
All right, Jake, back to you.
Thank you so much. So I want to bring in some more exit poll data. David Chalian has more information for us about the Trump electorate. David.
Yeah, we're taking a deep dive into Trump voters tonight in the primary. What was their top issue? Immigration. 43% of Trump voters tonight said immigration was their most important issue. Now, overall, voters in the primary said economy was, but Trump voters have immigration above economy. 35% say economy, 9% foreign policy, 6% abortion. Looking for other areas of Trump's strength among his electorate, 48% of Trump voters said the quality they were looking for in their candidate was for somebody who's a fighter, fights for people like me. 30% says share my values. 15% said they were looking for somebody who could defeat Joe Biden, the electability argument. And of course, this is not surprising, only 5% of Trump voters were looking for somebody with the right temperament. Among the how you favor your candidate versus is that your motivation or disliking the opponents, among Trump voters, 80% of them voted for Trump because they strongly favor him. Only 17% had some reservations, and only 3% of Trump voters today in the New Hampshire primary said they cast their ballot for Trump because they dislike Nikki Haley. And then when did you decide who you were going to support? We've talked throughout this whole primary process about Donald Trump's sticky support, and it locks in early, and that happened here too. 74% of Trump voters decided before this past month that they were with him. 25% of them decided in this last month. Dana?
David, thank you so much. So many interesting data points there to talk about. The first one that he discussed, Jeff, you and I have been noticing this on the campaign trail. We all have, but specifically, last night I was at a Trump event, and he really did talk about those issues about immigration, about Social Security, where he was pounding Nikki Haley on that. And those are issues that work for him and are among the most important in the electorate here.
On paid television as well, for the last week and more, you could not turn on WMUR and Boston stations, which flood this state, without seeing that Nikki Haley wants to take away your Social Security. And there were older retiree women watching an ad of her, what she said. It was a really pretty stark ad. So that and immigration. So actually this campaign was about issues. She would push back saying, I've never said that, that's a lie, but she decided not to debate, so she didn't have a wider audience, and she didn't have paid TV as much on those specific issues. She was talking more about competency. So I think that probably hurt her in the end.
I want to go to something that we didn't see live on CNN because the former president gave up the microphone for a little bit, but he did come back, and one of the things he did was kind of needle the man who endorsed him, Tim Scott, about the fact that Tim Scott supported him instead of Nikki Haley.
She actually appointed you, Tim? And think of it, appointed, and you're the senator of his state, and she endorsed me. You must really hate her.
Awkward. Chris?
Well, let me say, Tim Scott, to his credit, then said, no, I really love you. So he wasn't going to go down that road. But it is interesting. I mean, that is a fact that Nikki Haley appointed Tim Scott to be a senator to an open seat, and he then supported and endorsed Trump over her. And Nancy Mace, very similar thing, had great ties, great support from Haley, and ended up going for Trump. And you got to think, in South Carolina, that's going to count for something, and the governor, McMaster, also, that a lot of the people who know her the best in the Republican establishment have actually supported Trump rather than her. Now, I know she'll say, well, I don't want the establishment. I don't care about it. I'm with you folks against them, against the elite. That's a tough thing.
That's true, but go back. That's true. That moment, though, having Tim Scott standing there and Trump saying, boy, you must really hate her.
I mean, this is what happens when you stand behind or next to Trump. This is what you give up. You know, you give up a certain amount of, the ability to control your own narrative. And he is just happy to take what he needs from somebody like Tim Scott and put it out there in that way. I mean, I've covered Tim Scott for a long time. That's not, I mean, hating people is not his MO. It's not kind of how, if anything, he's known as the opposite. He's an incredibly genial, pretty soft-spoken guy in the hallways, right? There is, I will say, not a lot of love lost between the Scott and Haley campaigns because Tim Scott decided to run for president in the first place when she was also running. And I do think that that's an element here as well that's going on behind the scenes, that, in fact, he decided this was going to be his time as well. You know, she obviously took, as we've said repeatedly, appointed him, and there was this sense like, hey, why aren't you kind of on board with me? So that's kind of been looming in the background all the way along as well, and it's part of why going home right now is so complicated for her. And what does she do? I mean, if she was going to a state that wasn't her home state, it might even be, easier for her to continue this fight against Donald Trump. If she loses big in South Carolina, I mean, that's really, really embarrassing for her.
It is. And Dan, as you did some great reporting, obviously, with Tim Scott and Nikki Haley, sort of getting to the bottom of, did he inform her that he was going to endorse Trump? Look, I thought he looked very uncomfortable. We've all covered Tim Scott for a long time. He looked very uncomfortable. This is just the beginning of him being on the Trump train. So that will certainly be interesting. But look, his message tonight, clearly she worked for Donald Trump, and he thinks that she should fall in line, and she's annoyed him.
Yeah. I also, just going back to what we did take live really quickly, the fact that he gave Vivek Ramaswamy a 1-minute timer, that he couldn't go past 1 minute.
Vivek blew through 1 minute, just for the record.
Well, I mean, that he doesn't want him to go and sort of steal the show.
I find it odd that he gave time anyway. I mean, this was...
I did too.
I mean, there were a lot of things, obviously, about that speech that we think were odd, and one of them was obviously the attack on Nikki Haley rather than celebrating, but he gave time to Vivek Ramaswamy, and then he gave time to Tom Homans, a former immigration official, and you think, well, he had all the networks, all the cable television stations, and he's given time to other people. It was like saying, here, cut away from us, and we did.
Right.
Very unfocused.
Well, but Ramaswamy was specific because he wanted to start to jab.
Right, but Tom Homans not quite so much.
Not quite so much, you're right. All right, coming up, we're going to hear from a group of South Carolina Republican voters who have been watching our coverage tonight, what they think about the results in New Hampshire, where we are, and what it could mean for the upcoming Republican primary in their state.
We have a key race alert. Take a look at the numbers in New Hampshire. Donald Trump, obviously, the winner there right now at 18,586 votes ahead, 54.4%, to Nikki Haley's 43.6%. I want to go to CNN's Gary Tuckman in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, with Republican voters who have been watching tonight's vote. Gary, what have you been hearing?
Anderson, we are in Charleston County, South Carolina, in the town of Mount Pleasant. And I have a problem with my earphones. Sorry about that. I'm going to turn it off, and now we're good. And we've been watching the coverage, CNN's coverage, of the New Hampshire primary, the 15 loyal Republicans here in Charleston County, South Carolina. Incredibly important primary next month. Nikki Haley says she will be in it. She'll continue running for president. But will she? That's a big question right now. For context, I want to explain to our viewers that 9 of you plan to vote for Donald Trump in the South Carolina primary. 2 of you plan to vote for Nikki Haley. 2 of you are undecided or staying neutral. So with that context, I'm going to ask you, do you think this was a good night for Donald Trump, this margin that he won by? Yes or no, everybody? Yes. Does anybody, these are our 2 people right here who are voting for Nikki Haley. Do you think it was a good night for Donald Trump?
It was a good night for him.
Do you think it was a good night for Donald Trump? Okay, so my question is, Should Nikki Haley stay in the race? She says she's going to. You are Nikki Haley's supporter.
Well, she said she's going to stay in the race, and we'll see what she does. I think at the proper time, she'll make that decision. But right now, she's not at that position, at that decision yet.
And how do you feel?
I think she should stay in the race. I think she has come from behind in other races, and I think she has 4 weeks, I believe it is, to make some changes in her campaign. And I think she needs to really drive her message home to the South Carolina voters.
You are undecided. Are you still undecided after seeing the results from tonight?
Yes, I am. And I'm basically waiting to hear about policy, specifically what they will do for some of the concerns that are in the black community, like education and crime.
Do you think Nikki Haley should stay in the race?
I think she should stay in the race because I haven't heard from her about what she thinks right now, some of her policies and what she might do.
Larry Kabrowski here is a county councilman, former chairman of the Republican Party in this county, so you're staying neutral right now. My question for you is, do you think Nikki Haley should stay in the race?
I think it would be a very tough road for her. I think if you look at our state, our governor, or both our senators, or 5 of our 6 congressmen, all came out, for Trump. And if you looked at the results in New Hampshire tonight, as I was watching, 75% of the Republicans voted for Trump. I feel this would be a very tough state for her.
Maurice Washington used to be the chairman of the Republican Party here. You're supporting and going to vote for Donald Trump.
Correct.
Do you want to see Nikki Haley stay in the race?
I think she needs to take a long, hard look at the demographics, the voter demographics. If she couldn't win in New Hampshire, which favored her as a candidate for the presidency, I don't see a pathway forward in a state like South Carolina and other states ahead or after the South Carolina primary.
You're a Trump supporter. What do you think? Do you want to see Nikki Haley stay in the race?
I agree with...
do you think she'll stay in the race, too?
Do I think she probably will hang in there. I don't think it's a wise decision.
Why?
Well, like you said, most of the majority of the people have spoken in the party, and you've seen where Vivek, Tim Scott, Ramaswamy, everybody is bringing the party together. I think now is the time for unity, and I think this kind of like splits the party and takes away where we can unite. And most of the party right now has united.
Does anyone else think she should drop out, your former governor? So a couple of you. Well, here's the question. I found this really interesting. I want to tell our viewers that almost everybody here, I think, except for one person, thought that Nikki Haley was a good governor here in South Carolina. Who doesn't think she was a good governor? Okay, one person. But everyone else said she was a good governor. Why don't you think she'd be a good president?
Well, I don't know if it's so much that she wouldn't do a good job at that. I just think she's the wrong person for the job at this time.
Why is that?
I just think Donald Trump has made a presence in our world. He has made hard decisions with other leaders all across the world. And he's proven that already. I mean, he was the only one who has kept us out of wars, kept us out of conflict.
Well, he's not the only one ever, but you're saying during his, because we've had presidents since George Washington.
Yeah. Well, true.
Okay,
true.
I think we all know that.
Yeah.
I was never a history teacher, but I know that.
So he's just the man for the job. He's proven himself. And
what do you think?
Well, I think it's undeniable that Nikki Haley had a good track record as governor. But President Trump had a good track record as president. And he did a lot of good as president, and I think he can continue to do that.
One of the things I want to ask you, Nikki Haley, when she spoke, we were all watching her speech and Donald Trump's speech together. She said, quote, "The first party that retires its 80-year-old candidate will be the party that wins this election." What did you think of that statement?
Well, I thought it was a bit of poor judgment for one thing, because that is an age group that vote. They have the highest turnout of any age group routinely. So I think disparaging that age group, and it was not a smart thing to do.
What do you think about that when she said that?
I think she got some enemies from that. That was just a low blow.
A low blow?
Yeah, it was a low blow.
Because I saw some of you hiss when she said that. Let's see. Does anyone think there's accuracy to that? What about you?
She has said before that she likes to tell the hard truths. I think in that she told one. I think she's probably spot on with that comment.
To our 2 Haley voters, if Nikki Haley doesn't make it and Donald Trump is the nominee of the Republican Party, will you vote for Donald Trump?
Of course I will.
What about you?
He'll have to convince me with his campaign. He needs to be what I call more presidential. He needs to have less drama, and he needs to have better results.
And do you think that if he isn't, you could possibly vote for a Democrat, Joe Biden, for example?
That's a stretch. That's a stretch. I worry, though, with when a president creates and lives in drama, I worry about the global situations that we face. And I think we only need one dictator to be offended by something our president, whoever it may be, says, and we could end up in a very serious situation. So it concerns me that we have so much chaos. And I think Donald Trump, he loves chaos because that's when he does best.
So one more question about this. I want to make sure I know what you're saying. But if Donald Trump, in your estimation, keeps continuing chaos, and you don't like Joe Biden, who might you vote for?
I might write in somebody.
Who would that person be? Yourself?
You.
Me. I'm not running for president. The one thing I want to tell all of you is thank you for watching this with us. It's nice meeting all of you, and I hope all of you with different opinions stay friends after this. Are you going to?
Sure.
Okay, good. The South Carolina primary is still 32 days away, February 24th. We'll see if Nikki Haley is still in it. Anderson, back to you.
Gary Tuckman, a lot may change between now and then. Back with the team here in New York. It's always interesting to hear from them. There are so many people we have heard from tonight, voters in New Hampshire, who seem to think that maybe the former president has moderated his positions or is a different. I mean, we heard that gentleman talking about, is he going to be presidential?
Yeah, I think third time's a charm. We're going to see a totally new Donald Trump.
Yes.
No, I'm totally joking. Listen, he's been largely out of the public eye. Aside from court cases or brief speeches he makes, people forget the chaos. They forget the way that he talks about people. The average voter, they're paying bills. They're thinking about sending their kids to college. They're not paying attention to the kind of micro dramas that surround Donald Trump in the D.C. and New York class. But when he's front and center, and this is a two-person race of him versus Biden, they're going to remember the kind of man that he is. And I think his biggest obstacle has always been his own inability to control what he says. He's somebody who, a lot of us took a gamble on him in 2016. Some of us did in 2020. They're going to remember the actions that he had at the end of his last presidency. They're going to remember the way that he talks about people, the bigotry that he casually spews. And I think they're not going to want that person back in the White
think
House.
that's exactly right. And I also think this is why the long general election campaign benefits Biden, because the longer the contrast, the more people are exposed to Trump, the more they're looking at the choices between Biden, who they may take issue with, but who is not somebody who's constantly spewing personal invective and making everything about him and talking about retribution. And the longer that people see that contrast, the more Trump is going to continue to wear on.
I think one of the great dichotomies has been that Trump has a very proficient staff in this campaign. They've executed the blocking and tackling of campaigns really, really well, better than he's had in the past. And, we saw it again in New Hampshire. But the question is whether their advice prevails over his impulses. And tonight's speech was an example of that. That's going to, and I think when pressure comes and there are hard moments, I think the impulses win over. And, that is he can be his own worst enemy.
Very much. I thought was interesting, I'm hearing this from a lot of voters, is this idea about these wars and that there weren't wars when Trump was in office. And people, to your point, they don't track all this stuff and know all the background, the detail, and all the times that Trump almost, got us in a lot of trouble. This is going to be an issue. Donald Trump, when we see him, we think chaos. I think there are people who look at the world and see chaos. And they are trying to figure out, where do I get to peace? Where do I get to stability? And I think that Trump is going to try to say, I'm the peace and prosperity guy, which for us, I think on the left, it seems completely ludicrous. But I'm starting to hear voters echo that. And so I think we got to be careful. We see chaos in Trump, But other people see chaos in the world and might think that Trump is just strong enough and crazy enough to bring that chaos to an end.
On top of that, I think Biden, of course, when it comes to foreign policy, has taken some hits in the public eye after withdrawing from Afghanistan, et cetera. So never mind how young voters in particular are feeling about how he is supporting Israel in the war in Gaza. So that's already kind of a soft spot. But I think I'm also interested in this idea of sort of how Trump is going to play in the public space around these issues that people are most thinking about: the economy, abortion, immigration. There's no moderating that message, right? The message is what it is. And do you think there's going to be some new version of the immigration argument?
Not immigration, but he's already tried to start to moderate his abortion position.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And because he obviously knows it's a big deal, to your point. So I think on some he may, and to Van's point, I think he's going to pitch himself as the peace and prosperity guy. We talked about this a little earlier, and
I think in the media
and that is a more moderate policymaker to say, well, I would rather not.
In the media ecosystem in which people get a lot of information about Trump, they consider that chaos self-inflicted by Democrats. They consider that Trump derangement syndrome. They consider that people whipping up lots of scandals that don't really mean anything because they just want to go after Trump. I don't actually think they look at it and say chaos follows him wherever he goes. I think there are plenty of voters for whom they think that these are just a general kind of culture war battle.
But I also think that the presidential candidates have to run in the environment that they're running in. They have to deal with the reality in front of them. So, you know, it's for a voter to say, well, Trump was a peace, you know, a president of peace. We weren't at war when Trump was president. Well, in this campaign, there's a difference between a hypothetical where we're not at war and the reality of Donald Trump saying, I'll kowtow to Putin and give him what he wants, and that's how we'll get ourselves out of this war.
Right,
I mean,
right.
there are, you know, it matters how he approaches. And so when he's forced to answer for his foreign policy positions that are, you know, at odds with how most Americans feel about what America should be doing on the world stage, that's different. That's concrete. That's not abstract.
But I think there will be voters who say we're only at war because when we had a strong president, people knew better, and now we have a weak president, and things get out of hand. One thing that jumps off the page at me, totally off the beaten path, but the continued pulling apart of our electorate over education, college versus non-college, and how they see the issues that you just pointed out. It is the continued shattering of what we have thought of as our partisan splits over this. Pretty amazing.
Let's go back to Jake in D.C. Jake. Thanks, Anderson. And now I'm going to bring you a key race alert. We've already called the race, the Republican primary in New Hampshire for Donald Trump. We have 59% of the estimated vote in, and Donald Trump is maintaining his significant lead. He has 54.5% of the vote, 105,386 votes. That's more than 21,000 votes ahead of Governor Nikki Haley, who has 43.5% of the vote. What we have there is basically an 11-point lead, give or take. Let's go to MJ Lee at the White House now, where President Biden has issued a new statement. MJ.
Yeah, Jake, this is a new statement directly from President Biden issued by the Biden campaign. Here's what it says. It says, it is now clear that Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee. And my message to the country is the stakes could not be higher. Our democracy, our personal freedoms, our economy, all of those things, he says, are now at stake in November. It's also just worth noting that he did take a moment in the statement to thank everyone who wrote his name in New Hampshire. Obviously, that was a race that the campaign was not officially competing in. So as we have been talking about all night, this is the moment that the Biden campaign is fully making that pivot to the general election. And just to illustrate that point, a new T-shirt has gone up on the Biden campaign website. And the reason I want to talk about this, you can see here, the words say on that T-shirt, together we will defeat Trump. Again, of course, in a different color for emphasis. This $32 T-shirt, I'm told by the Biden campaign, is the first merchandise of the 2024 election that references Trump specifically. They're also selling some other items that have these words on them. And even though these items are going up on the website for sale for the first time, you know, these designs, I am told, were actually ready to go by the campaign for some time. So this is just one more reminder that even though the campaign feels like they got that confirmation that it is full steam ahead for the general election tonight, the big expectation, the widespread expectation all along has been that they expected to face up against Donald Trump come November. They are also going to be holding a press call in the morning, and I'm told that, too, is going to be a call to lay out the campaign strategy, the campaign's path forward to reporters. So just every sign right now points to the fact that the Biden campaign is seeing Donald Trump as their competition heading into November, and they're going to operate as such going forward.
All right, MJ Lee at the White House. Of course, we should note the obvious that Nikki Haley is still, of course, running, and Donald Trump is not officially the Republican nominee. This will obviously feed into the hands of the Haley campaign, which wants to argue, see, Joe Biden is really eager to take on Donald Trump because he thinks he can easily beat him, and Haley supporters make that argument as well. But be that as it may, if current trends continue, Donald Trump does become the Republican presidential nominee, and Joe Biden is the Democratic opponent. What does that look like? We haven't looked at one of these since 2020, so bring us back up to speed.
All right, so let's look at this map. And yes, people who support Haley will say, why are you doing this now? Number one, we're going to have this conversation into what it looks like tonight, and we're not there yet. But you could also have this conversation with Biden versus any Republican, really. And now Trump has certain strengths and weaknesses versus them that we can talk about as we go through them as you go. But here's where we ended 2020. Despite what Donald Trump says. Joe Biden winning with 306 electoral votes, free and fair election, 232 for Donald Trump. Here's where that would be today because of the post-census. Electoral votes get reallocated. States change population. And so Joe Biden would actually lose 2 just because of the census changes, right? So he would come down to 303, meaning the states he won in 2024 have fewer electoral votes than they had in 2020 because of the census, and some of the states Donald Trump won have more. So this is where you would start with the 2020 map. Now, one way for any Republican, but Donald Trump won Pennsylvania in 2016, lost it by a bit, but was in play. So let's say Donald Trump won Pennsylvania and Donald Trump won Georgia. That would flip the election right there, just 2 states. Just 2 states, right? And so the Democrats, if you're in Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, you're saying, no, Joe Biden's going to hold that. So let's give it back to him. All right, so there's one there. Georgia, that was a tight one. This is Republican. So let's say we stay down here in the Sun Belt, right? I was just going through this with David Challen hypothetically. So give back Arizona. I've been in Nevada in my reporting project, very much in play. For the sake of argument, give it to Donald Trump. Look at this. Wow. Look at this right here, 270 to 268. So Trump could get, an electoral vote there. In Nebraska and Maine, allocate their electoral votes by congressional district. That's a Democratic district right there. But that's an easy map there. I haven't gone to Michigan or Wisconsin. In this scenario, Pennsylvania is blue. Just tonight, we're watching New Hampshire, which, again, Hillary Clinton just barely won New Hampshire in 2016. Joe Biden won it by a more healthy margin in 2020. But let's say New Hampshire was back in play. Under that scenario, Donald Trump could win Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, and New Hampshire and be president of the United States, or any Republican could win right there. So Biden is weak at this point. The numbers all support that. That does not mean that Biden can't hold that, win that a second time. That was historic when he won that. It's been a long time since Georgia won. There is no reason tonight to say, that was my sleeve, sorry about that. Sure, you could argue that this could happen. Again, you could argue that. But tonight, when you look at Biden's numbers and you look at the enthusiasm gap between voting for Trump and voting for Biden, it is not hard. And again, I left Wisconsin and Michigan off the map here. There's a scenario. You look at polling right now. You can look at polling right now. You take those two, look what that does. That's 278, 260. At that point, it becomes almost a pick 'em, right? If you go out here, that gets you really close. That gets you over the top because Arizona. So Joe Biden is president because he won Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, and Pennsylvania. And let's go back to that and keep it there so people can see where we were. But it was, again, it's 75 to 100,000 votes spread between 1, 2, 3, 4 states, 5 states if you want to count them that way. That's why he's president. Yeah. It would only take flipping them back. And so we enter this race with a very weak incumbent when you look at the data. I know Democrats, it's January. There's time to recover, but the data is the data. He is a very weak incumbent right now. And if you just look at the polling, the enthusiasm gap, and we're seeing it in these elections so far, Trump voters coming out. This will be, no matter who the Republican nominee is, a 2016, 2020, we're going to do it again in 2024. And I would just argue at this point, because of Biden's weaknesses, we always talk about Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. The new states, last time, because Biden won them, big deal. Georgia, Arizona, Nevada's always on there. It is conceivable that you add a New Hampshire. So we're going to see how this all settles and get through it, see how the Biden campaign reacts and recovers. But the big question I have right now is, number one, Trump is very competitive. If the election were tomorrow, most people would probably bet that Trump would win it. It's not tomorrow. But the question in my mind is it just those 5 or 6 states, or do we have an expanded map? Can the Biden campaign, the reshuffling the campaign staff, they say it's early, they say they're not engaged yet, do they engage in a way that protects the softer blue states, or do we, as we get deeper in, say, is New Hampshire really in play? Are we looking again at a place like Virginia or Colorado? I'm not saying we're going to do that, but that's my question, is can they reinforce the blue and then get out into the battlegrounds?
But just for people keeping track at home, the states, at least right now, to keep an eye on, may I?
Oh, let me take this off for you. There you go.
I'm going to make them nothing. Nevada.
Okay. Battleground.
Arizona, and then of course we got, right? What am I hitting?
You just
you do it. You do.
If Illinois gets flipped,
I didn't mean that.
Then we're making history.
But do the three.
Here's what you want to do.
The blue wall, and then Pennsylvania, and then Georgia. Right? Those are the 6, and then possibly more. Aaron.
Jake, you'll never learn. Never learn not to touch his wall. Okay. All right. So, all right. Well, they're over there working that out. Okay. I wanted to play something else Nikki Haley said tonight, because now when you hear Biden coming out and saying, all right, it's a race between the two of them, Biden, Trump, which of course is what they want. You in a sense think they'd want Nikki Haley because they think that would be better for the country, but they prefer to run against Trump. Here's something Nikki Haley said tonight.
Most Americans do not want a rematch between Biden and Trump. The first party to retire its 80-year-old candidate is going to be the party that wins this election.
And she's right about that, Caitlin. I mean, every poll shows it.
Yeah, I think both things can be true. I think we can see that voters overwhelmingly do not want a Trump-Biden rematch, but also Trump right now is emerging as the strongest Republican candidate who has vanquished all of those who tried to challenge him, except Nikki Haley so far. She is the last person standing in this race. And so I think the question going forward is the argument that a lot of Republicans who did not endorse Trump and endorsed Governor DeSantis or Nikki Haley or others who were in this race was that Trump was going to be a liability for them in the general election. I mean, that was one of Ron DeSantis' key arguments. One, he didn't really make strongly enough, I think some people would say, until the end of his campaign came close. But if you're the Trump campaign and you're looking at these numbers tonight that John King was just laying out there, what we heard from David Chalian earlier, this many people who voted for Nikki Haley weren't necessarily voting for her because they were enthusiastic about her, but they were voting against Donald Trump. I think that is something that should cause a 5-alarm fire inside the Republican National Committee, and is probably welcome news for the Biden White House, because those are voters that they can try to appeal to.
This age thing is so fascinating to me because it goes back, I mean, even when Biden was running in the Democratic primary and age was an issue, this idea of whether or not there should be the generational shift in the Democratic Party then. Now that same question is being raised on the Republican side. And interestingly, even though the polls show the voters do not want this matchup, for sure, I think the reality is that voters are finding themselves here, ultimately, because this is about choices. Neither party wants to disarm themselves, and so, as Nikki Haley put it, I think it's actually such a smart way to put it. Maybe the first party to let go of their 80-year-old might be the victor, but who's going to be the one to move first? Yeah. And I think that's where we are as a country, and that's why this is kind of such an intractable problem. Nobody wants Trump, nobody wants Biden, but nobody wants to be the first to walk away from either.
So there was a post today on social media, Manu, caught my attention. This guy, Meb Faber, okay, comes out and he says, and it was actually really interesting, Bill Clinton was president, 25 years ago, 24 years ago? He's technically younger. than either Biden or Trump now.
Yeah, that's incredible.
And I just think it gives a little perspective. By the way, I went to check the birth dates just to make sure, right? August 46th. Trump, of course, was Flag Day 46, so it is true. But it is really amazing when you think about it, right? Bill Clinton is in the distant past.
Yeah.
He's younger today than either of the two people
That is pretty
who are
remarkable.
likely to be the next president.
It is pretty remarkable. I can tell you that there are fears in both parties about the top of their ticket. On the Democratic side, it's really the enthusiasm. Getting together the same coalition that Biden won back in 2020. A lot of the voters are concerned about whether it's the age or whether it's about his handling of the Israel-Hamas war, something that's hurting him in key battleground states like Michigan, getting the enthusiasm up, which is why you're hearing the Biden campaign want to go after Trump, because they think that can juice the base. But on the Trump side, it's the real fears about being able to expand beyond the base, being able to expand among those key voters that will be critical in some of these down ticket races. The Senate is at stake. The House is at stake. You've heard Nikki Haley say time and again how Trump cost them the Senate, how Trump has hurt them all along while he was in office. But there are a number of purple states and Senate races that are up in Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania. And in the House races, this is going to be a hard-fought election in 18 districts that Joe Biden carried, Republican seats in Joe Biden carried, whether it's in New York or in Nebraska and the like. And Trump's vulnerability in those districts could have that bad impact, which is why a lot of Republicans are fearful about him as the nominee.
And I think it's fair game, absolutely, to talk about Trump's age just as much as it is to talk about Biden's age. I think if Trump was inaugurated, if he did win, he would be the oldest president to ever be inaugurated. He would surpass when Biden hit that record when he was inaugurated. But when you talk to voters, and obviously we saw what happened where he confused Nancy Pelosi with Nikki Haley repeatedly the other day and never corrected himself in that moment, something that his allies tried to defend. But when you talk to voters, you do not hear the same concerns about Trump's age as you do when it comes to when you talk to voters when they talk about Biden's age. And I think the question will be how they view, Trump's legal issues compared to Biden's age and whether they find those to be equivalent bad things for both of them and how that shifts how they vote.
All right, we're still here and still ahead. We're digging deeper into our exit poll data from New Hampshire to find out how Donald Trump won tonight and what those reasons are. Our live coverage continues right after a quick break.
Welcome to CNN's coverage of the New Hampshire Republican primary. Donald Trump is now a second critical step closer to his goal of returning to the White House. The former president scoring an overwhelming victory in the Republican primary in New Hampshire tonight, defeating his last major Republican opponent, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley. Let's take a look at the vote now. We have 60% of the estimated vote is in. Donald Trump still maintaining his healthy lead with 54.4% of the vote, 107,873 votes. He is about 21,500 votes ahead of Nikki Haley, who is in second place with 43.5% of the vote. Trump addressed supporters after his victory was declared, and he slammed Governor Haley, insisting she has no chance of winning the nomination. He also turned his fire on the man he's expecting to face off against in November, President Joe Biden.
If you took the 10 worst presidents in the history of this not great country right now, it's a country in decline, it's a troubled country, it's a failing country, frankly. But if you took the 10 worst presidents and put them together, the 10 worst, absolutely 10 worst, I used to say 5. Remember I started, I'd say 5. Then I said, wait a minute, we can add another 5. They would not have done the damage that crooked Joe Biden has done to our wonderful country.
Governor Haley is insisting that the fight for the GOP nomination is far from over, despite the considerable investment she made in New Hampshire, where she came in second. She's vowing to take her fight against Trump back to her home state of South Carolina, although polls show that she is trailing the former president there as well.
Now, you've all heard the chatter among the political class. They're falling all over themselves, saying this race is over. It's not over. Well, I have news for all of them. New Hampshire is first in the nation. It is not the last in the nation. This race is far from over.
Kristen Holmes is at Trump headquarters in Nashua, New Hampshire. Kristen, what is the latest from the Trump people?
Well, right now, Trump is on his way back home to Florida. As we had mentioned, he was expected to be in court tomorrow in New York, but court was canceled. Now, I do want to talk about that speech a little bit because it was so different from what we had seen from Donald Trump in Iowa when he called for uniting the Republican Party, uniting the country, saying that all his opponents should get out of the way so that he could do that for America. This was just angry and just aimed at Nikki Haley. It was clear he had watched her speech, and he spent most of the time attacking her. At one point, he even brought up Vivek Ramaswamy to attack her. Then he said to South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, "You must really hate her if you endorsed me," in kind of an awkward moment. If anyone knows Senator Tim Scott, that is not his brand of politics. He quickly went to the mic and said, "No, I just love you." This is him aiming at Nikki Haley. He is angry that she did not drop out of the race, even though he led by double digits. And the thing to point out here is his team was managing his expectations. They had seen those polls 2 weeks ago that showed a single-digit lead, and there was some concern there. They actually poured millions of dollars into the state to make sure that he won by a hefty margin, and they were very pleased to see the margin that he won by. In fact, but you wouldn't have been able to tell by Donald Trump's speech. But there was one part of that speech that I think we kind of glossed over in some of our coverage, and it was when Donald Trump recognized how important his messaging on immigration was. That was a key part of their strategy here in New Hampshire. They believe that is the #1 issue for Republicans in the state of New Hampshire and a very important issue across the country. That's why he continues to hammer it home. If you remember the ads that they ran, they spent millions of dollars, both the super PAC and campaign, on ads hitting Nikki Haley over and over again on immigration. And Trump essentially acknowledged at one point, I guess that messaging on immigration really works. And that's something that we should all expect to see him, not just when he runs the remainder of the primary, but if he is a nominee in a general election as well. They believe that is a key talking point.
Yeah, a Trump supporting Republican congressman told me that the issues they think are going to be crime, economy, and the border. Kristen Holmes. Let's go over to Nikki Haley headquarters. She's in Concord, New Hampshire. Kylie Atwood is there. Kylie, so what is next for Governor Haley? Is she competing? She's not competing in the Nevada caucus. I know I believe there's a caucus in the Virgin Islands. What's next on her plate?
Well, first and foremost, her campaign has been very clear that they are planning to compete in South Carolina. Now, of course, they're still watching to see what the final margin is here in New Hampshire, but it's South Carolina and beyond, at least from the official standpoint of the campaign. I was talking to some folks who are already talking about Super Tuesday states, but also this evening, you had some top campaign officials who were gathered in this building just behind me after Nikki Haley gave that speech this evening. And they're talking to younger campaign officials, some volunteers, and really working to boost confidence, to raise spirits. Betsy Ankeny, who's the campaign manager, she put out that memo earlier today saying we're not going anywhere, that Nikki Haley, isn't backing down. And I'm told that in her casual conversations with lower level staffers and supporters in that room tonight, she echoed that same message. So that's what they're saying publicly. That's what they're telling their team internally. Obviously, there will be conversations among the top tier of campaign officials as they look at those margins and what it actually ends up being here in New Hampshire. One campaign official is telling me that they really do hope that they get within single digits of former President Trump. And right now they're teetering on the edge. It's like 11 points or maybe 9 points, and that'll be quite a differentiating factor for them. The other conversations that are happening in here have to do with what the next few events, what the next few weeks look like. We know Nikki Haley has that event in Charleston tomorrow night, but there's also a Women for Haley event happening in Texas later this week. There's also fundraisers that are on the calendar. So they're talking about those events. As of now, they're not going anywhere. They're doubling down on Haley's leadership, saying that they're, in this for the long haul. And so what will be interesting to see is if their tone shifts at all overnight once we see what the actual margin is here, if she was able to come, within a close distance of former President Trump.
All right, Kylie Atwood in Concord, New Hampshire, thanks so much. Let's go to the magic wall. John King, we're still waiting for about 35% of the vote, roughly a third of the vote to come in. Former President Trump has an 11-point lead as of now. Any chance that that's going to be reduced as Governor Haley is hoping it will happen?
And it's been a steady 12, 11, 10 for quite some time. Is there a chance it can get reduced? Yes. There is. Can you get into single digits? Yes. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'll give you a possibility. Number one, remember a lot of the small ones. And Nikki Haley's, if you look at it as a checkerboard, she's filling in, winning some of these smaller rural counties more than you would have thought at the beginning of the night, or certainly more if you look back at a 2016 Trump map of the state. So she is competitive in some places and winning in some places that Donald Trump won, right? Which is why she's in it's a 10 or 11 point race. Now, can she get closer than that? Well, you have 4 counties right here in the area we went to college. Sorry, my sleeve is getting in the way tonight. Let me take this off. Let me do it with this hand. Do it this way. That's better. John Kasich won all 4 of those towns, right? I'm calling them counties. They're towns in New Hampshire. John Kasich won all 4 of those. Conceivable. Nikki Haley wins all 4 of those. And it's not a ton of votes there, but it's a way to get back. So that's one way to look at it, where the possibilities. I'm going through the possibilities here. Again, Donald Trump's going to fill in. You see a lot of red in there, so he's going to get his share too. Where else is it possible? Well, this is one of the places that was on when we went through the list earlier, Exeter. We have no votes in from Exeter yet. This is a place the Haley campaign expected to perform well, and 260 towns in New Hampshire. This is in the top 20, number 19 in terms of population. So it's not a huge pool of votes, but there are some possible votes there. And if you stay in that neighborhood, again, the map shrinks down pretty small, so I'm going to bring it up and stretch it out again. If you stay in that neighborhood, that's where you do see some other possibilities. I'll put the emphasis on possibility. Again, okay, that's what you call a cranky map. So if you touch here and pop up, this is Derry, which is 4th in terms of population, right? Again, they're not giant cities or towns in New Hampshire, but it's 4th of 260, 2.5% of the population. We have no votes. And if you look, again, Trump's winning there, Trump's winning there, Haley's winning in some areas around there. We don't know how they're going to come in, but here's a pool of votes. If you're trying to cut into a margin, there's a possibility, and I just tap down here. This is another one, Salem, 2.2% of the population, right down along the Massachusetts border, right in there. So, yes, are there a few places where we have no votes that are significant by New Hampshire standards, population center, so pool of votes that you could get that if you run it up there, if you win most of them, can you get it under 10 points? Yes. Would I run to Vegas on that? This looks like a 10-point race. Could it be an 8-point race? It's possible.
Yeah, that loss in Nashua, though. Let me just see the latest in Nashua, because that was one that Nikki Haley was really hoping for, really needed 91% in, and she's down by about 5 points, almost 5 points.
So so Trump is leading by a decent margin in the largest and the second largest population center. So
that's rough. Not to mention the rural ones.
Go where the math is.
David Chalian, tell me more about what the exit polls say about who voted tonight, the Republicans and the undeclared or independent voters.
Yeah, Jake, we are looking at that divide on specific issues between Republicans and self-identifying independents. So if you look here, we asked, is Trump fit for the presidency if convicted of a crime? Among Republican voters in the primary tonight, 73% say yes, Donald Trump is still fit for the presidency, even if he's a convicted criminal. 25% say no. Independents, though, it's a different story. 59%, 6 in 10, say no, Donald Trump is not fit for the presidency if he's convicted of a crime. Only 38% say yes. Same kind of results when we asked, is Joe Biden the legitimate winner of the 2020 election, which, of course, he was the legitimate winner. Among Republicans, 2/3 of them, 67% in the primary tonight, said no. 32% say yes. For independents, it is the reverse. Among independents, 60% rightfully acknowledge that Joe Biden won in 2020. 37% of independents say no. And what is important to note here, Anderson, is that independents are behaving very differently than Republicans, and that is something that the Biden campaign is likely to take note of, even independents in the context of a Republican primary, Anderson.
Yeah, David Chalian, thank you very much. Back with the team here. I mean, again, David, to go over these numbers, he just said 73% of Republicans said Trump is fit for the presidency if convicted of a crime.
Yes, and look, this is a recurring story. He spun a story about the election. which makes the insurrection seem like an act of patriotism in the minds of a lot of his supporters, or at least the people whose impulse was to try and change that, and these indictments as politically motivated. But if I'm looking at this from the standpoint of the Biden campaign, like this is, and I said this last week in Iowa, this universe of people who don't say that among independents and Republicans, that's the universe you want to explore. That's a place where you might be able to pick up some votes. I agree with what Abby said earlier, which is that the preponderance of Republican voters are going to fall in line because we're in a tribal moment in our politics. But this is going to be a marginal race, and the margin may be those voters who answer the question in the negative.
There's a lot to like in this stuff for Trump. That number, just as it did with Iowa, jumps off the page at me. You can't lose that many Republicans and still win the presidency.
Or even
you can't lose a fraction.
And so I know a lot of people focus on how could 73% say it? That bottom number is the real number. And I'm not sure there's a TV ad or a tactic or an event or whatever you could come up with that might change a Republican's mind about Donald Trump. But what happens in that courtroom, if they ever get to court, and what that jury decides may be worth more to him or to Biden than any
I think this
messaging strategy that
let's
ever
hear from
happened.
Kate. I mean, how does the Biden campaign focus on that?
Yeah, so I think there's one challenge here, right, which is for the Biden campaign, which is that they don't control the timeline of what's going on in the courts, right? So conceivable, given what we know.
Not according to Trump.
Right, well, right, exactly. So conceivable, given what we know about the timeline as it stands and the likely delays, that there won't even be a legal reckoning before November. So for the Biden campaign, they've got to think about how can they use this, how can they pursue that universe of voters, even if they don't see a conviction. And so I think there are different ways to do that. One of the ways to do that, because we know that if Biden heavily leans into, in a really sort of, blunt way, some of the legal pieces, we know that sort of plays into Trump's hands. It's this idea that, this is all politically motivated. He sort of risks, the Biden team kind of risks overplaying their hand a little bit with Republicans who may feel a little fuzzy about what's going on. But I do think there's an opportunity for the Biden team to draw a line between Trump's legal problems and the way that his behavior has an impact on them. So, you look at the E. Jean Carroll case, for example. There's a way for the Biden team to talk about, this is representative of how Donald Trump thinks that women shouldn't have autonomy over their own bodies, that they shouldn't be able to make their own decisions, that they shouldn't have the kind of freedom, that he doesn't respect women's bodies. I mean, there are ways to argue about the kind of substance of what's going on in the courts in a way that kind of draws the line more tightly to the issues that people are sitting around at their kitchen table and worried about and thinking about. And they can't, but I think there's a fine line. I don't think
is that something you see the Vice President, Kamala Harris, spearheading?
Sure. Well, I think she'd be part. I think, certainly, particularly if you're going to reproductive rights, if you're going to, to this argument, she's an incredibly effective messenger on that. I think she's part of this conversation. I don't know that she's leading it any more so than Joe Biden is, but I think she's part of the conversation, no question about it.
You said they don't control the timeline. Also, with the cases themselves, we're seeing that right now in Georgia, where D.A. Willis is just completely wrapped up in a scandal around a case that a few weeks ago people looked at as being quite strong. That undermines some of the argument, right, for people who say, look, this is fundamentally a corrupt system in one way or another. And that's the kind of thing that the Biden White House can't control.
And of course, Trump is... I'm sorry, go ahead.
I do think one thing we haven't considered as well, the two campaigns aside, is that there's an animated and not tiny, based on what we saw today, group of former Republican voters who will never be with Donald Trump. There is very likely going to be a move towards some sort of a third party. That has been, the machinations have been in place for some time. There are people who feel politically homeless between the two. And coming to the fact that we're very likely going to see Donald Trump on trial by late summer, after the GOP nomination is clinched, after the convention, you're going to likely see his former vice president testify against him. You're going to see senior officials continue to say he is dangerous to have back in the White House, and who don't have confidence that the Biden campaign can drive that message enough. There's going to be another force that
What about RFK Junior. Yeah, I mean,
Well, that could be. I mean, you have to take seriously because there's a spoiler effect
and
there.
really, no label says that they're not going to do anything until after March.
Well, I think it went. They say April, and they were assuming that that's when the nomination will be determined. We'll see what they do. Listen, I think this third-party issue is a big one for the campaign because Biden had a one-on-one basically with Trump in 2020. You start introducing third parties. Trump has a very devoted base and a high floor and a low ceiling. He basically lands between 46 and 47. If you have a bunch of third-party candidates that lower the threshold, it makes it easier for Donald Trump. So this is one of the variables in this race that could be determined.
And when people are disgruntled, they are interested. We saw that during the year that Hillary Clinton ran. I think it was something like 6-8% of the electorate that actually went for third-party candidates. In that case, it was Green Party and Libertarian.
And I think this feels, it's starting to feel to me more like 2016, where everybody's just kind of grumpy and people aren't that happy with either candidate. And I do think that's when people begin to wander away. I think if you had Trump on trial, I think you drive up the intensity for Trump quite a bit. And so you've got to imagine in this 30% that's saying that they don't like this stuff, is there an offsetting effect where some people get even more passionate about the fact that their guy is, in the dock and could go to prison, and people are more passionate, and other people begin to back away. Can they back away and not back away into third-party, cul-de-sacs, but back away to Biden? That's going to be the challenge of this campaign.
And the lack of cameras in federal courtrooms and having to learn about this in the media will be very helpful to Trump supporters.
Still ahead, we're going to check back in with our group of South Carolina Republican voters watching tonight's coverage, what they think about the state of the GOP primary race as more results and exit poll data comes in. Our live coverage continues right after a quick break. And it's time for another key race alert. Let's check in on the vote board here with 69% of the estimated vote in. Donald Trump is still way in the lead, about 11 points ahead of Nikki Haley. He has 54.3% of the vote with 123,334 votes. He is roughly 24,000 votes ahead of Nikki Haley, who is 43.6% of the vote. Let's go back to Gary Tuckman in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, with Republican voters who have been following the results in tonight's New Hampshire primary. Gary?
Jake, the crucial South Carolina primary is next month. In honor of that fact, we have watched CNN's New Hampshire primary coverage with 15 loyal Republicans. 13 are now left. A couple had to leave and go home, but the 13 are with us right now. We've been dining and wining them. Well, actually, the hardest drink we've had is seltzer, because we want clear, concise answers. The first question I want to ask you, Donald Trump made it clear in his speech, he thinks this is over. Nikki Haley says she is continuing. Who thinks it's over? You do. Tell me why.
Because the results that we got tonight, that was the answer for her. It's over.
What do you think?
I agree. I do think that it's over. We'll see when South Carolina, but I think that it's over.
Now, if you haven't guessed, these are two Trump voters right here. There's 9 Trump voters of these 13. 2 people who say they're going to vote for Haley, 2 undecided or neutral. This gentleman right here is a Haley voter. Yes. What do you think? She says it's not over. She's continuing. She said she wants to come back to the sweet state of South Carolina. Do you all agree it's a sweet state?
Yes, yeah. Sweet state.
All right. So what do you think?
I don't think it's over. And just to remind my Republican friends, it's part of our Republican creed that we will take calculated risk, and we will think for ourselves, and we will face the challenges of life. And so Haley is taking the calculated risk. I think she should be applauded for sticking in there. It's just 2 states. We have 48 more to go. And if she feels she doesn't have a chance, let's give her that chance, but let's applaud her. This is democracy. It's not over yet.
And you're undecided. Do you think it's over?
I don't think it's over. I think it's an opportunity for her to state her case, talk about her policies, and see what she can do to rally the voters here in South Carolina.
You know what Yogi Berra, the Yankee great, said once?
Not over till it's over.
It ain't over till it's over. Is that your feeling?
Yeah, I think...
You think it's not over?
I think it's not over yet. I think after the South Carolina primary we'll see. But I think right now, I think Nikki's looking to come to South Carolina because she does have friends in South Carolina. She was a governor here, and a lot of people know her by name, and a lot of people vote just by that.
Okay, one thing I want to mention, Nikki Haley's been talking about age a lot. Tonight she talked about the first party to have their 80-year-old leave, the other party, 80-year-old leave the race, the other party is going to win. She's also talked about mandatory requirements for 75 or older to have testing. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about that?
I think she was half right. I think that in a time of war, we have war in the Middle East and Europe. It's kind of scary when you see the commander-in-chief that you cringe when you don't know if he's going to finish his sentence or not. It gives you a sense of insecurity. So
You're talking about Joe Biden.
Right. So
you don't think that's the case with Donald Trump?
Whether you love Trump or don't like him, I don't think anybody could accuse him of having a lack of vigor or stamina.
What do you think?
I agree. I think you know where Trump stands. The biggest crisis we have is
Well, what
the
do you
border.
think about the requirement for 75-year-old?
Well,
75-year-old. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 80.
You're 80.
I am.
You look good.
Thank you. My wife feeds me well.
Okay, good. So what do you think?
But I take an affront to all this about the age. It's not age with Joe Biden. It's competency. Joe doesn't have it. So it's annoying to hear 80 is a cutoff. We have friends who are older. Some are 100. And they're doing just fine.
Final question I want to ask you. This is a survey we've done in Iowa, a survey we did in New Hampshire. Is Donald Trump fit for the presidency if he's convicted of one of these felonies against him? Raise your hand if you think he is fit for the presidency, even if he's a convicted felon. High, raise it high so we can see you. Raise your hand if you don't think he's fit for the presidency. All right.
I'll qualify that, though. I think it would need to go through all the appeals, right on up the ladder. And if he's still guilty, then I don't think I would find him fit.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being with us. And like I said, sorry we didn't have any alcohol. I'm just joking. No one asked. I just want to make it clear, we're not drinking and partying here. We're eating a lot, though, and we're all full. 32 days away, the South Carolina primary. Back to you, Jana.
Thanks, Gary. I love when you quote Yogi Berra. I can just have so much more of that. I appreciate it. That last moment, Chris Wallace, it explains a lot. It explains a lot about where the Republican electorate is, the ones that voted yes for Donald Trump here, yes for Donald Trump in Iowa. Explains why Nikki Haley and others, particularly Nikki Haley, just today, when I asked a question like that, would he, Donald Trump, still be fit for president, even given all of these problems that he has? And she said yes. That's why.
It is absolutely fascinating, the idea that a president, first of all, a president has never been indicted on a criminal offense. And we're talking now about a president in this thought experiment going to a trial and being convicted. They didn't say that, he should be president or they'd vote for him, but they said he would be fit to be president. I'll tell you, I was talking to some people in the Trump camp today, and they feel that if he becomes the nominee and at some point, even before he racks up the requisite number of votes, he may become the nominee. They think that that'll put him in an even stronger position legally, because they say as the nominee of a major political party, that the argument that this is Joe Biden's Justice Department weaponized, trying to take out his opponent in an election, will have even more weight as an argument among Republican and independent voters. So they actually think, we've all talked about the possibility, well, if he becomes president, he could pardon himself. They think that if he becomes the Republican nominee, it provides him some armor, some defense against the indictments and the trials.
Never mind the facts that there are two layers, of course, between Joe Biden and this investigation, right, as you well know. But that
no, it just makes the politicization, the weaponization argument stronger in their mind.
I mean, we've seen that it has worked for them with Republican voters in this Republican primary. I mean, I do think it stands to reason that they're right with Republican voters. I do think the key test is going to be, are independents still willing to go along with that? I mean, I see that more as for them as a choice between Biden and Donald Trump. Are you willing to overlook all of Donald Trump's flaws because you're that unhappy with Joe Biden. But I think this goes back to, I mean, we were talking about this a little bit earlier. We are seeing the writing on the wall for how the Trump campaign is going to run this in terms of trying to discredit the justice system, to make that argument, politically speaking, that this is what this is about. I mean, we have seen, the former president has done more to tear down our institutions in so many ways over the course of his presidency, our norms. I mean, that's what we're in for the next year.
And it's worked. I mean, that is the key turning point of this Republican primary. We were saying just 8 days ago, at the beginning of Iowa, this will be the first test of voters weighing in 3 years after Donald Trump was sent from Washington. Well, we've seen voters respond in Iowa, now here in New Hampshire, but that was the turning point less than a year ago when the first Alvin Bragg indictment happened. Now, we ask voters the question of if he's convicted of something. We kind of lump everything together. When you do talk to voters, some of them sort of draw a distinction. Most do not. Everything sort of has been lumped together. But look, he may not even stand trial before November. So all of that sort of is just out there. But you're so right about independence. That's what the Biden campaign is hoping for. Even though the weaponization thing is out there. It's complicated by Hunter Biden, of course, and everything else. But that is
of the strategy
for sure. But that is one of the things the Biden campaign is holding out hope for independent voters, that they will reject Donald Trump because of this. But we'll see.
I just want to turn back to Nikki Haley and something that we were all noticing. We were getting emails from AFP, Americans for Prosperity.
Yeah.
And seeming to say that they're in it, but it was tepid.
Well, they said that they acknowledged there's a steeper climb in South Carolina. And it's kind of the first crack in, I mean, they have been very deliberate tonight, the Haley campaign, her outside super PAC supporters, to be very aggressive in pushing this message. She is in. And, her speech stood up to that as well. I mean, she clearly came to play on the stage here, to the point she clearly got under the former president's skin. But I do think there is this kind of background conversation going on, and we're going to have a lot to learn over the next 24, 48 hours about whether or not the money is going to continue to be there. I mean, we've talked a lot about how it is very, the ego of a politician doesn't usually lead them to get out all by itself, but if they run out of money, that's kind of that.
And we're still waiting for the final margin, which I think all of us are hearing from our sources that really is going to be determinative of what happens over the next several days. Donald Trump securing a big election win tonight, as we've been talking about, even as he fights to avoid losses in the courtroom. We're going to look at a mountain of legal problems facing the former president as he goes back and forth between the campaign trail and the courthouse.
We have a key race for you right now. Let's check back in with the voters in New Hampshire's Republican primary. Donald Trump still in the lead with 72% of the estimated vote in. He has 54.4% of the vote, 129,128 votes, more than 25,000 votes ahead of Nikki Haley, who has 43.6% votes. It's been about 10 or 11 percentage points up for quite some time now. Let's see how Republican primary voters in New Hampshire view Donald Trump's many legal troubles that they were discussing on Anderson's panel just a second ago. David Chalian is back with more exit poll data. David.
Yeah, Jake, we were looking before at the divide between Republicans and independents on this issue, but this is how the overall electorate tonight in the Republican primary in New Hampshire responded to this question. Is Trump fit for the presidency if convicted of a crime? 54% overall, a slim majority of Republican primary voters tonight said yes, even if he is convicted criminal, he is still fit for the presidency. 42% say no. We also asked, what is your feeling if Trump wins the nomination? And again, this is the overall electorate, including all those Haley voters. 61% of the New Hampshire Republican primary electorate say they would be satisfied with Trump as the nominee. 38% say dissatisfied. And what about those that say Trump is not fit for the presidency if convicted of a crime? Well, they went for Haley, as you might imagine, 84% to 13%, but they were only 42% of the electorate. And among the candidate preferences with those who would be dissatisfied if Trump wins the nomination, obviously that group, that 38%, is almost entirely Haley voters, 96% to 1% of Trump voters.
So 1% of Trump voters voted for him, but said they would be dissatisfied if he were the nominee.
Correct. You got that. So you try to figure out who those voters are.
I'll get right on it. I'm going up to New Hampshire tomorrow to figure that out. CNN's Paula Reed is covering Trump's many courtroom appearances across the country. Paula, lay it out for us.
All right, Jake, I think the easiest way to go through the unprecedented number of legal issues that Trump is facing is to do it chronologically. Let's start with a case that just wrapped up. This was a civil fraud case here in New York where a judge found that Trump engaged in fraud, lying to banks and insurance companies to try to get better terms on his taxes and his loans. And there was a weeks-long trial to talk about possible penalties. Trump testified in that trial and a few other charges. We're waiting for the judge's decision there. But Jake, he is facing potentially hundreds of millions of dollars in penalties, in addition to his ability to do business in the state of New York, also on the line. Now, next up, over the past few days, Trump has been in court here in New York, at least last week, facing a defamation lawsuit from E. Jean Carroll. Now, last spring, a jury found that he sexually abused E. Jean Carroll and defamed her, awarded her $5 million. Now, this case is back in court for a different statement that he made denying those allegations. Now, court has not been in session so far this week because of an ill juror, but it's unclear if court is going to be back in session. Trump is expected to testify in that case. Now, next up, in a little over a month, in March, he could face his first criminal trial. Now, this is the Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's hush money case. It's a little surprising this is the first one to go, Jake, because this is not considered to be the strongest case. And it was expected that the first criminal case he would face would be the federal election subversion case brought by the special counsel Jack Smith. But right now, there are pending appeals. Trump is arguing that he has immunity in that case, and the case is on hold until that is resolved. Now, the Mar-a-Lago documents case, the accusations of mishandling classified information, that is currently scheduled for May. Unclear if that's actually going to go on time. And then there's also the Georgia state-level election subversion case, long considered by Trump's legal team to be one of the most significant threats, because that case, if there's a conviction, would be outside any possible presidential pardon power. But right now, the prosecutors are facing some accusations that could result in disqualification. Jake, that would not make that case go away, but it could change hands and delay it further.
So that's a lot of cases, a lot of potential legal trouble. What's the most pressing one right now at this very moment?
So the biggest question is this immunity question in the January 6th case. The reason that is the most pressing is because the longer it takes us to get an answer from the appeals court on that, and possibly for the Supreme Court to weigh in, that's really going to determine if that case goes before the November 2024 election. If that case doesn't go, it's unclear if either one of the special counsel's federal cases, arguably considered to be the strongest cases against former President Trump, would go before the election. And also the biggest event on his calendar right now coming up is the February 8th arguments before the Supreme Court on whether he can appear on the ballots. We've seen a split across the states on certain constitutional language about a so-called insurrectionist ban. That's going to be a big day for Trump and a big decision.
All right, interesting. Paula Reed, thanks so much. Aaron?
All right, Jake. So, Laura, when you look at this whole calendar and the fact that some of the start dates are uncertain and some of the situation in Georgia and where there's a prosecutor, there's all kinds of uncertainty here. But, you heard that voter in Gary's focus group say, if Trump is convicted, I can't do that. Now, we can go through the polls, Jake talking about the 1%. It's unclear whether it will matter. But what is the likelihood of any sort of a conviction in any of these cases when you look at the timing? I guess let's go by two dates. One by convention, and two by Election Day.
Well, a lot of it is contingent on what the Supreme Court or the D.C. Circuit Court actually rules on the issue of immunity. For that issue, though, on whether or not you can actually even prosecute a former president for conduct that occurred while in office, normally immunity questions are resolved after a trial. This is different because it's now being confronted beforehand for obvious reasons. It's such a consequential decision, not just because it's Donald Trump or an election year, but because it has never been decided before. This is a really important note, though. When you're thinking about all the timing of this, The prosecution wants to have speedy trials. You heard that in Georgia. We all kind of mocked the idea that Fine Willis wanted to have a trial. I think it was in 6 months. Everyone thought, really? With that many defendants? Jack Smith wants a speedy trial. You know who doesn't? The person who actually owns the speedy trial rights, Donald Trump. Why? Because it's political currency for him not to have this trial happen before the actual election. Because he knows full well from the polling we talked about how this has actually benefited him. To say that it's a political witch hunt, to suggest this is all about the quote-unquote Biden DOJ that is actually spearheading this. Now, it's true, Biden has appointed the Attorney General, and that Attorney General has appointed Jack Smith. That's where it really stops there. But the assumption that he's trying to make among the American electorate to suggest, hey, they want me out because I'm that much of a threat to the candidacy and their campaign, this is where the tension lies and why he wants it to drag out.
Of course, the other candidates in the race are aiding him in this.
They are.
Or the ones who were in the race were aiding him in that argument. And the one who was left was just asked by Dana Bash this morning, is Trump fit for office? And she said yes. She answered that question yes, in addition to raising her hand on the debate stage that she would vote for Trump. So she's making the case for voters to put all of this aside. That doesn't even take into consideration Trump's actual alleged conduct here on the classified documents, on his conduct leading up to and on January 6th. It doesn't really, the E. Jean Carroll case, that he's found liable for sexual abuse and defamation, it doesn't address any of the actual conduct, just the idea that he has cases against him. Voters are going to have to confront the conduct in short order once this becomes not just a conversation among Republicans, but among the rest of the country.
I mean, Nikki Haley said that she wasn't even paying attention to the E. Jean Carroll case. The fact that the leading Republican presidential candidate had been found liable for sexual abuse and had not been paying attention to it, it really shows you how Republicans have steered clear of this. The question will be, to some extent, to what extent will the Biden team begin to talk about any of this? The White House has really tried to stay away from this because they don't want to look like appear that they're trying to taint the proceedings or that they were involved in this. Want to make clear the special counsel is separate from the DOJ, but there are so many elements that would traditionally come out in a campaign. What's been remarkable is that both sides, both Trump's rival on the Republican side and his Democratic rival, aren't even talking about some very serious criminal charges facing the candidate here, which probably is reflective in why voters are split on this issue.
I pressed the vice president on this very point yesterday in our conversation about what does she make of the fact that the Trump team is trying to suggest that it is, in fact, election interference on behalf of President Biden.
Let's play. You have
and
the
Kamala
exchange,
Harris.
right?
We had an
Let's
exchange.
play it. Let's play it.
Do you believe that when Donald Trump is making these statements to suggest this is all attributed to the Biden administration or to the Department of Justice, what is your response to people who believe that, in fact, it's all orchestrated as one?
Well, what he is saying is not factual, period. Period. And that would not be new for him, would it?
Do you think people believe that it's appropriate for a president to have immunity?
I think we're going to have to leave that to the lawyers who are handling the cases.
She didn't want to get into, and further in the interview, talking about why. She wanted to have that clear demarcation, said that the line had not been crossed between the DOJ and the White House because she's aware of that idea that somehow they are intertwined. But in reality, can you imagine, by the very next time we see January 6th on the calendar, it will be the vice president who will now be the new Mike Pence, with a choice of whether to certify an election, and people who don't believe it's a free and fair election, possibly in the past. And you think about the context. There is a trial that will happen. They hope to have happened before that date. But if it doesn't, then that would be unresolved by the time January 6th turns around, if, in fact, Trump is the nominee ultimately. And as to whether or not somebody who engages in behavior he is alleged to have engaged in should or should not be on the ballot. These are looming questions that are really fundamental to what goes next.
Well, and I think part of this is that there's a lot that's unknown. And what we do know and what we saw in those exit polls tonight that I think was the most striking is the number of voters who don't believe that Biden was legitimately elected. Now, these are Republicans or Republican-leaning independents who are going and voting in this Republican primary tonight in New Hampshire, but a lot of them do not believe, as the ones who are voting for Trump, that he legitimately won the election. That's why a trial on the election subversion charges could potentially actually be damaging for Trump. Trump knows this. His legal team knows this. Right now, when you talk to them, they are laser focused on making sure that it gets delayed past the election and working on that. And I think there's so many unknowns when it comes to, is the Supreme Court going to take up Trump's claims of full presidential immunity? Once they do that, if they do reject it, as some legal experts have predicted that they have, if that trial gets back on track here in Washington, right now there are no filings happening, then where does it go from there? Because if the Supreme Court takes until the end of its term at the end of June to make that decision, and then they have until the election, that's about 4 months for them to potentially have this trial. That's less time than what Jack Smith has said it would take. So these aren't questions that we don't know we'll get the answer to, but it's a big if we do get that before the election.
And just, it's unbelievable, just the lack of clarity. You can look at all that, you can look at a calendar, and yet the reality of it is no one actually knows when they come to trial, if they come to trial, and when it would actually be adjudicated. And then that starts the whole appeals process. Anderson.
Erin, thanks very much. While New Hampshire was voting, President Biden was rallying support for one of his top campaign talking points, abortion rights. MJ Lee joins us with more on that. How'd that go?
Well, Anderson, as the Biden campaign is making clear that they are making the full pivot to the general election, I did think it was worth just taking a beat to revisit that campaign speech from the president in Northern Virginia. As you said, you know, this was a speech that was meant to be focused on reproductive rights, an issue that the campaign is very much trying to put front and center going into November. But what was remarkable was that the speech was interrupted more than a dozen times. We saw how voters, people that were in the auditorium, actually, I'm so sorry about that, Anderson. I think you can hear me better now. We saw how, you see those images there, a number of people that were getting up throughout the auditorium, yelling out things like Genocide Joe, really showing their anger at the situation, the Israel-Hamas war, and the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. And this was something that the president initially sort of took note of. And then towards the end, again, more than a dozen times that we saw these interruptions, he sort of tried to speak over them as the supporters of the president started chanting 4 more years and also tried to help him move forward. But I did think it was just like an important reminder. You know, the war and the handling of the war, the president's continued support for Israel, this has been a very tough political issue for him. And advisors have said, they have acknowledged that it has been a distraction. It has been something that has taken away from his ability to travel and focus at times on the domestic issues that he wants to focus on. This was another reminder of that we saw today, and clearly is going to continue being an issue that the campaign has to continue balancing and has to continue figuring out sort of how to deal with those things, as there are important domestic issues that he does want to focus on. Anderson.
Yeah. MJ, appreciate it. Thanks very much from the White House. Back with the team here. I mean, Kate, how do you think, I mean, this is, I don't know if it's a wild card, but this is sort of the unknown about, obviously, the war continuing between Hamas and Israel. How does the president deal with this?
Yeah, well, it's clear that he's going to have to be, I think, a little more forceful in talking about what he's been doing to try to get hostages released, the work that he's doing to meet with the Arab American community here in the United States, including Palestinian Americans. I think the White House and the campaign have not been as vocal about that work that is ongoing. And so I think they've got to put that front and center a little bit more so that people can see and get a sense of how his policy and the way he's approaching this is infused with concern for human rights and what's happening in Gaza. The other thing I would say, though, is, you know, if you look at polling on the issue and you dig in, there's absolutely a vocal, particularly cohort of young people who are upset. But across the country, broadly speaking, Americans are actually quite supportive of the way that Joe Biden is handling this. They're supportive of his support for Israel. Again, I'm not discounting what we're seeing, and I don't think that the Biden White House is discounting it either. And I do think they need to do more to address it proactively. But I also think presidents have hard choices in front of them. I think Joe Biden is making a decision that he thinks is best to contain the conflict in the Middle East and not let it spiral out of control.
The issue he was trying to talk about today was abortion. That's obviously something that they feel. I mean, we've heard the vice president talk about that a lot. That's certainly something they feel they're going to focus on a lot.
I interviewed the vice president last week, and every question she brought the answer back to reproductive rights, the border, economy. I don't necessarily agree with that strategy, but it is very clear that it is basically a two-pronged election message: the fight for American democracy and reproductive rights. Here's my caution to the Biden team on that: is of the states, the battleground states that are going to determine the election, most have pretty universal access to abortion, with the exception of Georgia. That has a 6-week ban. In many of these places, that is not going to be the most motivating issue. It's going to come back to the border and to the economy, two issues that Donald Trump just traditionally performs extremely well on. So I think they're going to have to, yes, those are motivating with their base, but they're going to have to broaden out the issue if they want to get these core people who are saying, we can't be with Donald Trump, but we need an alternative.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that they do have to broaden out the message, and it's got to be bigger. It has to subsume these items. And the fundamental question is, what kind of country do you want? And what kind of future are we going to build for our kids? And you know, I don't want to belabor what I said before, but this whole line of questioning underscores something that is really material for this election. It is hard to run for re-election as a president of the United States in this day and age. Everybody talks about the advantages of incumbency. Incumbency can be a real burden because when you're running, you can sort of choose what issues you want to talk about. Mm-hmm. When you're president, you can't. When you're president, a war erupts somewhere, you're expected to react. A disaster happens, you're expected to react. And so the thing you fear as a strategist for a president running for re-election isn't just the stuff you know, but the stuff you can't predict.
Dan? Yeah, look, I think that the abortion thing is it's the wind beneath the wings of this party. When you look at the midterm elections and you look at what's gone on, the polling was always terrible. People didn't like Biden, people didn't like it, but women are going to fight, and people who love women are going to fight on this issue.
Still ahead, the attacks flying between Donald Trump and Nikki Haley tonight, setting the tone for what's to come as the GOP presidential race moves forward. We'll be right back.
And welcome back to our coverage of the New Hampshire Republican primary. The Granite State just catapulted Donald Trump closer toward a rematch with President Joe Biden. Trump winning the second Republican nominating contest of 2024 by a rather wide margin and a potentially crippling defeat for his last major Republican opponent, Nikki Haley. Let's take a look at the vote board right now. With 76% of the estimated vote in, Donald Trump still with a significant lead, 54.3% of the vote. That's 135,836 votes. That is almost 27,000 votes more than Nikki Haley, who has 43.6% of the vote. Haley acknowledged her loss, and Trump marked his victory, and the gloves quickly came off. Trump seemingly fuming after Haley told supporters that he has not won the Republican nomination yet, and she is fighting on.
We won New Hampshire 3 times now, 3. She didn't win, she lost.
New Hampshire is first in the nation. It is not the last in the nation. This race is far from over. Now we're the last one standing next to Donald Trump.
Who the hell was the imposter that went up on the stage before and, claimed a victory? She did very poorly, actually.
The worst kept secret in politics is how badly the Democrats want to run against Donald Trump. A Trump nomination is a Biden win and a Kamala Harris presidency.
Let's not have somebody take a victory when she had a very bad night. She had a very bad night.
Most Americans do not want a rematch between Biden and Trump. The first party to retire its 80-year-old candidate is going to be the party that wins this election.
Just a little note to Nikki. She's not going to win. We're going to have the greatest election success. We're going to turn our country around. We are going to win this.
All right, I'm back here at the Magic Wall with John King. And John, 76% of the vote in. Donald Trump with an 11-point lead, almost. Where are we still waiting for votes?
I'll show you in 1 second. I just want to make a very quick point. Donald Trump won Iowa, you won New Hampshire. Notice he doesn't complain about elections when he wins. just throwing that out there.
Right. In 2016, he lost Iowa to Ted Cruz, and he accused Cruz of stealing Iowa.
Just an instructive point for Republicans watching. The people of Iowa, Republican governor who supported another candidate, counted the votes, Trump won. New Hampshire counted the votes tonight. A Republican governor supported another candidate, Trump won. The system works. I'm going to leave it there. It's not perfect, but it works when it comes to counting votes. So you asked me, where are we still out? And that's the big question. Look, Trump is going to win New Hampshire tonight. He has won New Hampshire tonight. The question for Nikki Haley, with a month to go to South Carolina, is can she convince people that she's, look, this is better than Iowa, right? If you go to Iowa, let's zoom out the map and go back to where we were just a week ago. Look at that. That's one county, right? So you look at that map. You look, she's in third place. You can make a visual argument, and you can make a math argument. She's at 43% here. That looks better, and that looks better. Second is better than third. Second is still second, right? And so part of the challenge here is, can she get that under 10 points? Some people, that's meaningless. To the voters in South Carolina, future states, I'm not sure that matters. It matters to donors. It might matter to staff morale. Can you prove that you got into single digits against the faraway frontrunner that is Donald Trump? Can it happen?
And staff morale, just to make one note here, staff morale matters a lot when you're relying on people working for free, traveling from Iowa to New Hampshire to South Carolina, and only doing it because they believe in the candidate.
Right, and again, whatever your politics at home, people are working these campaigns. Most of them are young people. Some of them, actually, I shouldn't say it. Some of them are older people, but they're doing it for they're doing it for what they think is the right reason, and they're great to meet when you're out there, no matter who they support, whether it's Donald Trump, Nikki Haley, or anybody else. Those people doing the work, they believe in the cause. So what are we looking for, right? So let's just come here and look. Where are the outstanding votes? The bigger the circle, that means more votes are outstanding in that area. Right, so you see most of the bigger circles are down here in the lower part of the state. You see here where it's shaded red, that means there's outstanding votes in places, a decent amount, when you see a circle that says in places Trump is winning right now. Up here, that means we have no votes at all. If it's gray, we have no votes at all. Some outstanding votes in these places here where Haley is winning. But see your big circles right here? Mm-hmm. So let's blank that out and see and come back to where we are.
Which should theoretically be a Haley area, but it's not.
It's been back and forth. Donald Trump won this area in 2016. Right, but this was Haley's big target tonight. If you look in the gray, meaning no vote towns that I circled inside here, especially those right here, it's about 20% of the state population when you add them all up. So again, that's not a ton of votes. It's not a ton of votes. This is not a huge state. Is it possible, if she runs the board here, that she can get that below 10%? It's possible, but I just want to go through the math for you, what we're talking about here. So one of the places she's going to look at here is Derry, 2.5% of the population. So a place that if you won by a decent margin, you close the margin. But look, Trump won here. Trump won here. Trump is around here, so Trump's not running weak. Let's just go to a place that we talked about earlier, stretch it out again so the people at home can see it better. The Haley campaign said Hollis was one of their targets, right? So let's bring that back up here and come into Hollis. That's Nashua. Right along the state line, it gets interesting. So here's Hollis. This is one of their targets. That's great, right? 57% against the former president of the United States, 41. But look, it's only a little more than 400 votes, right? So you look at the percentage and you say that's great. But when you're trying to come back against the lead, number one, it's not going to happen. He's going to win. But number two, you're trying to shrink the percentage. So even in a place where you're getting 50-something percent, you're only shrinking it down a little tiny bit.
He's up by almost 27,000 votes in a state like New Hampshire. That's a lot of votes.
And a lot of this up here is going to fill in. Again, they're small, right? So you come up to a place like this, 91 to 37. So 50-plus votes there. It's not a lot, but you pick another one here. That's a couple. That's 100-plus. And you just keep going through it, and you see that one's a lot closer here, and you come down. But where the outstanding vote is, there's a possibility to narrow the gap some, but this is going to be most likely a 10-point race. It might be an 8-point race.
Isn't Lancaster the county that always predicts?
Yes, and so we went through this a little bit earlier. This is Lancaster here. It's a town, not a county in New Hampshire. It's a mistake I make, too. But Lancaster, there's 5 or 6 of these towns that have been right for 70 years. Lancaster's one of them. It's been right in the Republican race, and it picked Donald Trump tonight. I'll show you another one down here. Just outside of Concord is Pembroke. Whoop, I missed it again. Let me come back to Concord. Stretch it out. As we go on, here we go. It's right here. Pembroke has been right for 70-plus years. It had Donald Trump. And then you come out more toward the coast, and you come up in here, and Rochester is somewhere in here. I think it's around here. There we go, right there. Rochester is, again, one of these for 70-plus years. They've been right in the Republican nomination race, and they are right tonight. So the streak continues.
How about Hanover? What's going on there?
So Hanover, you come in here. Again, one of these places where wow, 85% of the vote, that's big. You know, that's 1,200 votes. That's a place where you are making up some, which gives you, we're still waiting for Lebanon to come in next to it here. This was John Kasich country, right along the Vermont border right here, an area you know well. So again, if you're looking for places for Nikki Haley to get more votes, to shrink the margin some, they're there. Now again, some of these other small ones are going to fill in red and Trump will pick up there. But the main point is down here, right down in here. There's Salem, Derry, and a couple other small towns very close to the national border that are essentially suburbs. Again, they're not big by if you live in the Pennsylvania suburbs or you live in the Cleveland suburbs. They're not big by them. But by New Hampshire standards, 2% of the population. There's a chance, but Donald Trump's going to win. The question is, what's the margin in the end? Is it a little above 10 or a little below 10? That's the question.
So my conclusion is Nikki Haley did what she needed to do in Hanover, but not in Nashua. Let me throw it to Dana Bash.
Thanks, Jake. And I want to bring in Kristen Holmes, who is still at Trump headquarters in Nashua, New Hampshire. Kristen, what are you hearing from Trump sources in the campaign, which you talk so often about how it's a very different campaign? It's run in a very methodical way, particularly compared to what he did in 2016. What are you hearing from them after the speech that their candidate gave?
Yeah, Dana, that's really been the most interesting thing about covering Trump this cycle is just the team. It's not necessarily Donald Trump himself. He is still Donald Trump. And then we saw that tonight when he gave a very angry victory speech. He had no teleprompter. He went after Nikki Haley almost incessantly. Even after we had cut out of the speech, he had given time to Vivek Ramaswamy to go after Nikki Haley. Then he even brought up Senator Tim Scott, saying, they work together, so you must really hate her if you endorse me, which, of course, was an awkward moment given that that's not really Tim Scott's political brand. He had to then say, no, I just love you. When I talked to his team, they think that their strategy here in New Hampshire worked. They were very concerned several weeks ago about the rising poll numbers from Nikki Haley. They were understanding that it was likely that Nikki Haley was going to get a big swath of the independent voters, particularly after Chris Christie dropped out of the race. That's when they started targeting her with millions of dollars worth of television ads. This is between the campaign as well as the super PAC. And they hit her on two things, both immigration and Social Security. Immigration to shore up the Republican voters, and Social Security to secure some of those independents, or at least lessen some of her appeal. And now they feel like it was very successful. And that's what they're looking at going into this.
Kristen, thank you so much for that great reporting, as always. And now to Kylie Atwood at Nikki Haley headquarters in Concord. Kylie, what are you hearing?
Well, listen, Nikki Haley came out very clearly tonight saying that this campaign is far from over, saying New Hampshire is the first primary, it's not the last, and committing to competing in her home state of South Carolina, where the primary is about a month from today. But there are obviously questions about how she's going to be able to effectively do that. She herself is headed to Charleston tomorrow. She's got a speech there tomorrow night. We know that her campaign has put resources on the ground in Charleston and across the state already. They have about 5 offices that are open there. They have folks that they have sent staffers from Iowa to South Carolina to begin working there. But there are questions about how well she'll do there, particularly given the fact that she has promised that South Carolina will be her best showing to date. And her campaign, for that matter, has not actually said that there are any specific states in the primary process that they believe she can win. Now, they point out that the actual campaign hasn't started in most of these states, and they do think eventually she'd be able to win. But in order to actually see a path forward for her, there are questions about where she could win if she's going to be able to actually effectively challenge former President Trump going forward.
Yeah, and that is the cold reality that her campaign is facing. Speaking of cold, get out from the cold there. It's snowing again here. It's kind of hard to believe. Thanks, Kylie. Appreciate it. And back here, Casey, just kind of going back to the big picture.
Yes.
Of what we saw tonight, first and foremost, with Donald Trump's win. Nikki Haley's speech that Jake played some of at the beginning, and the way that Donald Trump responded.
as a victor. That was his victory speech.
Right. I mean, it's a bit classic Donald Trump in many ways. But, you know, as I'm thinking about this, Dana, the main question is going to be what is Nikki Haley going to do over the course of the next couple of weeks? And because we got a taste tonight of what Donald Trump is going to do to her. And I was kind of going back through, you know, as he was running against her here in New Hampshire. I mean, he misused her given name. He intentionally misspelled it, called her Nimrata. He did a very, you know, deliberately unflattering portrait, mashing her face together with Hillary Clinton's face. He brought Vivek Ramaswamy up to basically trash her after he had, you know, done so much against the debates, against her during the debates. She is going to be in for a very rough few weeks with Donald Trump throwing everything, and he is willing to do things that most politicians aren't willing to do.
And that's another thing that he said very clearly during his speech tonight, warned her.
And just a little note to Nikki. She's not going to win. She's not going to win. But if she did, she would be under investigation by those people in 15 minutes. And I could tell you 5 reasons why already. Not big reasons. A little stuff that she doesn't want to talk about. But she will be under investigation within minutes. And so would Ron have been, but he decided to get out.
What do you make of that?
Well, I'm certainly not surprised. I mean, it's not the first time that you know, this is the man who talked about Ted Cruz's father being involved in the Kennedy assassination. So it's not unusual for Donald Trump to make allegations, sometimes completely unwarranted allegations against his opponents. You know, it's an interesting thing. I feel that the speech he made tonight was really a totally unforced error. It wasn't what his campaign expected. They wanted to act like he's a general election campaign candidate already, the nominee. Friday, he's going to be in Arizona. Saturday, he's going to be in Nevada. You know, these are going back to something that John was talking about, John King, a while ago. Those are key swing states that he's going to have to win or may need to win to go up against Biden in November. So I think he's going to, 2 things are going to be going on. On the one hand, he's going to be beating the heck out of Nikki Haley, but on the other hand, I think he's also going to be making moves towards a general election campaign against Joe Biden.
Nikki Haley said tonight, our fight is not over. And that is true tonight. I mean, that's how she feels, obviously, coming after this. She told you today that she has to do stronger here than she did in Iowa. And she did. She lost by 32 percentage points there, or 32 points. And here it's about 10, maybe 11. So she reach that metric, but the reality is this race is moving along. So yes, she can stay in. We will see. It often takes a couple days for that. But she was making an electability argument tonight that really has fallen flat with this Republican base. Ron DeSantis made it. She's been making it. It just hasn't worked. And really one of the stark things over the past year is the weakness of President Biden, or perceived weakness, has strengthened Donald Trump. And now that electability argument that was used against him by all of his rivals, it just does not ring as true. So if she goes into South Carolina, she said the people there know me. He can't attack my record. A lot of new voters in South Carolina did not live there when she was governor. That could cut both ways. So we will see what she does. Let's give her time. She has a rally scheduled tomorrow. She's on the air. Her campaign says they've reserved $4 million in television time. That can always change. But for now, she's in the race. And if she is, the race goes on. We'll see for how long.
If you're going to win, you got to put up a W somewhere.
That's true.
Very well said. Thanks, one and all. Just ahead, the GOP nomination all comes down to delegates in the end and putting a W up somewhere. We'll tell you where that race stands, plus the anxiety among some congressional Republicans about Trump's impact on their futures.
Some more votes have been counted, so let's bring you a key race alert. With 78% of the estimated vote in, Donald Trump maintains his commanding lead of 54.2% of the vote. That is 140,315 votes. He is about 27,000 votes ahead of Nikki Haley, who has 43.7% of the vote. New Hampshire may supercharge Trump's momentum. Let's see where he stands now in the all-important fight for delegates, the key to locking up the GOP nomination. David Chalian has those numbers. David, 22 Delegates at stake here in New Hampshire, and where are we?
That's right. As you noted, Iowa and New Hampshire are really more about momentum than they are about the raw delegate counts. But those 22 delegates at stake, we've been able to allocate all but one of them based on the results tonight. Donald Trump has 12 in tonight's New Hampshire results. Nikki Haley got 9. We have 1 left to allocate based on proportionally how the vote comes out. But, Jake, if you look at what that means added with Iowa and the delegates that we allocated there, remember, overall, you need 1,215 votes, delegates, to win the Republican nomination. Right now, our estimate has Donald Trump with 32 delegates between his Iowa and New Hampshire victory, Haley with 17, DeSantis with 9, Ramaswamy with 3. And by the way, DeSantis and Ramaswamy, Jake, they get to hang on to those delegates up until the convention.
Right, and Ramaswamy and DeSantis, we should point out, have both endorsed Donald Trump. A little food for thought for our friends at the panel over there, Aaron Burnett.
Absolutely. So let's start here with, I'm doing some math here on something David Chalian's going to say, which is actually going to be really fascinating. But hold on as he walks over here. Manu, I know you have something new to share.
I mean, there's some real fears among top Republicans about Donald Trump, even as we're seeing more and more Republicans start to line up behind his candidacy, something that we have seen really since Iowa. You talk to a number of Republican members, they are still fearful about his impacts down the ticket. One member from a swing district, a House Republican from a swing district, told me, yes, he frankly believes that Donald Trump will cost them the House in the fall, saying 20% of Republican voters will not vote for him. Independent voters think Biden is weak, but they hate Trump. Dems, he said he motivates them to vote in the election. That's the view of this individual member, who the Republicans, frankly, will need in order to keep the House. But it's not just this individual member. There are members who on the record about their concerns as well. Senator Todd Young, an Indiana Republican, today was asked by reporters about whether or not he is going to be part of this Trump establishment or Trump people who are rushing to Trump's side. He said, hell no. That was his response. And I asked Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell today, I asked him whether he has to repair his frayed relationships with Trump. Remember, McConnell excoriated Trump in the aftermath of January 6th. He said, I don't have any news to make. I'm not going to comment about it. He refused to say if he will endorse him or not. So you're seeing the real divide within the party. It's something that they have really had to live with since Donald Trump first came on the stage, but one in which could have a real serious impact down the line, assuming he gets
And they're all rushing. I mean, I know they say they're not running, but the rushing and running. I mean, Nancy Mace, terrible person, according to Trump.
They're definitely
now one of the first to, pound the table in his favor.
A lot of Republicans are absolutely rushing to Trump's side, but the evidence is in the favor of the Republicans Manu has been talking to. To quote Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis, Trump has lost the House, the Senate, and the presidency multiple times at this point. And so there's not a whole lot of evidence that Trump helps anyone but Trump. And even the last time around, he couldn't even really help himself. In spite of that, though, there are, I think, the reality for the rest of the Republican Party is that they have not been able to capture Trump's energy for themselves, and they're afraid of what happens if they abandon him. Trump has successfully brought a lot of new voters, non-traditional Republicans, into the party. And the real reason I think we're seeing so much of this is that Republicans, the ones who are left, who are not named Trump, are still trying to figure out how do you get those people to engage. Yeah. And you can't, it's a non-starter that they will not engage with you if you abandon Trump.
So this is the math I was doing, okay? Because you were pointing out, David, how many people are making this decision for the whole country? 192,000. So
I think now we're up to 196,000.
Okay.
So Donald Trump, I'm combining Iowa and New Hampshire.
Of how many people have voted so far?
Voted for Donald Trump.
Right.
So he has collected between two states 196,000 votes, with New Hampshire still counting.
You could update the math.
Okay, 196,000 votes, and it's all but over.
That's
and
like a
he
New York
has
City block
he has like demolished the competition. To me, it just speaks to not only his grip on the party, his pseudo incumbency, and the strength of that, I think, is on display here as well, but just watching so few people actually cast a ballot for him in these first two states overall, compared to 330 million that this is a contest to ultimately represent and sitting in the Oval Office. It's just astounding how quickly the party completely came around.
Infinitesimal. Okay, so the math is that's 0.059% of the U.S. population. It changed from 0.058 to 0.059 when you gave me the updated number, but I had to check it. But
I don't think that was the intention of the way that this primary process was supposed to go, obviously. I mean, it is supposed to run its course in which many more states are supposed to have their say. And those states get bigger and they get, more complex. They have different needs. They have different priorities. But this particular contest, it could very well end here. And that decision gets made by such a small, unrepresentative, even for the Republican Party, a small but unrepresentative portion of the population.
Well, and it's the first time since 1976 that someone who's not an incumbent Republican won both Iowa and New Hampshire. And we're seeing this play out and obviously seeing how there's only one opponent left. And you would think that for someone like Donald Trump, who, 2 years ago politically was in a lot of trouble with all of those very Republicans that you were just citing, even a year ago they weren't ready to get behind him. They wanted to see how the primary process played out. You would think that on that night that Donald Trump would emerge victorious in this sense, and that's not what you heard in that speech there. And I've been talking to sources in Trump world who've been speaking to him or around him in the last several hours. He's continuing to seethe about Nikki Haley. There was this moment after Iowa where everyone was kind of just on cloud nine in Trump world. They were all celebrating. They were so happy that they didn't have to fear Ron DeSantis or whatever they thought it was going to be 8 months ago. Tonight is not like that. Trump is going after Nikki Haley, claiming that she said she won when she congratulated Trump on his victory, criticizing her outfit, criticizing his White House press secretary for commenting on the race, and privately he seems baffled. People have told me that she is not dropping out of the race, that she's staying in this race. He doesn't understand why she is not also bending the knee and letting him have the entire grip on the GOP nomination, which he may very well have in just a few days. But instead of being victorious, he's seething tonight.
Yeah, I mean, strategically, it would make sense to completely ignore Nikki Haley and just say that this race is over. The party needs to unite behind me and take it to Joe Biden directly. But Trump is just unable to do that. He takes the bait every single time.
You have been going through so many of these exit polls and looking through so many different, tabulating. What has stood out to you the most so far tonight?
What stands out to me is that the strength of Trump with Republicans on issues that he will run on in a general election, immigration, the economy, he has a lot of support on these big issues that he's going to run on. But I think some of his vulnerabilities are also getting exposed here as a potential general election candidate when you look at how independents voted. And I understand, I agree with you, most of them will put on their R jersey if they are Republicans. But we are seeing some vulnerabilities here while we also see his strengths. That's what I'm learning from these numbers.
1/2 of 1/10 of 1%.
Yeah.
Just another way of saying it. That's who's making this decision so far. All right. President Biden thanking New Hampshire voters for writing his name in on the Democratic ballot, saying Republican voters did deliver a clear message about Donald Trump. We're going to go to the White House after this quick break.
A Trump nomination is a Biden win and a Kamala Harris presidency.
We have beaten Biden. You could almost say, who can't? Who the hell can't?
Well, to be clear, Donald Trump has not beaten Joe Biden. He has never beaten Joe Biden. But Trump and Nikki Haley are both looking ahead to the prospect that there could be a Biden-Trump rematch after Trump's decisive win in the New Hampshire Republican primary today. President Biden is already looking ahead to the general election, saying it's clear that Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee. CNN's MJ Lee has details.
The Biden campaign is making it fully clear tonight that they are making the full pivot, the hard pivot to the general election, and that they expect that the November race is going to be between President Biden and former President Donald Trump. President Biden saying in a new statement tonight, it is now clear that Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee. And my message to the country is the stakes could not be higher. Our democracy, our personal freedoms, our economy, all of those things, he says, are now going to be at stake come November. To that end, we are also learning about some big changes that are coming to the Biden campaign. We are learning that two top advisors that are in the West Wing to the president, they are going to be moving over to the campaign full time. This is Jen O'Malley Dillon, who, of course, ran the president's campaign back in 2020. She is currently the deputy chief of staff at the White House. She is going to be moving over to the campaign to be the campaign chair, and mostly is going to be focused on overseeing the campaign's efforts to get to 270 electoral votes. We also have news of Mike Donilon. He is one of President Biden's closest advisors. He, too, will be going over to the campaign in the coming weeks to be the campaign's chief strategist and focusing on issues like messaging and the campaign's paid media strategy. Now, another just a clear data point that we are also seeing from the Biden campaign tonight. They have put up on their website for sale the first merchandise from the campaign that explicitly mentions Trump. There's a T-shirt that says the words, "Together we will defeat Trump again." Now, as for what the campaign will be doing in the coming days, for starters, they've announced that they are going to be holding a press call come tomorrow morning. This is going to be a call, I'm told by officials, where they lay out what they see as their path forward and just describing a little bit more in detail now that they have acknowledged that they see Donald Trump as being their general election competitor, how they see the path going forward for the Biden campaign. So this is something that we're going to be monitoring tomorrow morning as well. Back to you.
All right. Our thanks to MJ Liam back here at the Magic Wall with John King. So according to Joe Biden and team, it's over. That's it. Where do we go from here? Where are we?
Very rare night of agreement. Donald Trump thinks it's over. The Biden White House thinks it's over. Nikki Haley says not so fast. She is right by the math. We will see as we go forward. David just pointed out a few minutes ago the delegate count. 2.5% of the available delegates have been awarded after tonight. 2.5%, right? You need 1,215 to win. The front runner has 32. So, yes, by math, we're not even close. We're just starting. However, the momentum thing, right? Donald Trump wins 2. Nikki Haley says, as we move on, I can do better. Right, so we go to Nevada. There's a primary and a caucus. The caucus is what gives the delegates. Trump has it wired. Then you go her home state of South Carolina. One of the arguments they're making is it's one of the open or semi-open primaries, meaning in South Carolina, they have no party registration. So if you're a registered voter, you can vote. Okay, but history says that's a very conservative electorate. We'll see if Nikki Haley can expand it or change it, but our history tells us that's a pretty Republican electorate, and even the independents tend to be more conservative, but it's a shot. Michigan is an open primary. I've been in Michigan. Republicans there, very Trumpy. Again, there are suburbs. There's a chance. Joe Biden won Michigan in the general election. There's a chance. So you're looking at this map and you're saying, where's a win for Nikki Haley? Well, if she can sustain herself past her home state of South Carolina, then you come to Super Tuesday where there are 874 delegates. There are some open primaries here. So some of them are down here. Texas is open. Donald Trump versus Nikki Haley in Texas. Okay, yeah, I wouldn't go to Vegas on that one.
What about California?
Virginia is open. California is not. And California is a state where, you think California is a blue state. It is a blue state. Look at the last 10 years of the history of the California Republican Party. I'll let you do this on your own at home. This is a pretty Trumpy party right now at the scene. Again, in a primary, people in the suburbs get to vote. People who don't vote for Donald Trump get to vote, who might still be Republicans get to vote in the primary. So there's a lot of we can see, but you just look at this list, right? That takes money. That takes money. So the challenge is to prove yourself, and she has to do that. We'll come all the way back. She has to prove herself by there. That's a long ways off. There's a long ways off. There's going to be a lot of talk as we get the final result here, whether she can even sustain herself to there. She says she will.
Especially with Donald Trump refusing to debate her, as he's refused to debate every single one of his opponents, which I guess it's a strategy that's worked. I wouldn't say it shows the most confidence in one's debating skills. Anderson?
Yeah, Nikki Haley will no doubt be bringing that up quite a lot. Let's take a look at how President Biden did in New Hampshire with the write-ins. I think we have the numbers on, or not. There we go. 67.1%. Dean Phillips, 19%.
Yeah, listen, this was a really awkward situation because Biden wanted to have South Carolina kick off the campaign. He finished 5th in New Hampshire 4 years ago. The party rules were changed, so if he actually participated in this primary, he would have been penalized by the party for participating. Dean Phillips, a congressman from Minnesota, came along, felt that Biden should move on, wanted to make that point. And quit his congressional seat to become a candidate in New Hampshire, spent $5 million there, and a grassroots campaign from Democrats there and a super PAC cropped up, and they ran a pretty effective campaign against him. I mean, a 3-to-1 win on a write-in, I think, checks the box for Biden.
But it's so embarrassing and weird that we can't just have a normal primary. Look, I love South Carolina. I'm glad that South Carolina is going first. But there's something wrong in a party where you have this much discontent with the candidate and nobody can figure out a way to vote or do anything that counts or send a signal or send up a smoke signal or get a carrier pigeon. Do something and listen to the fact that people in this party are very worried that Biden's not the right person. And so, and by the way, he can't give a speech now because these kids are so upset. In 1968, there was an unpopular war with very scary images, and it mobilized a generation and it hurt Democrats in '68.
Well, that was the example that Dean Phillips chose to.
Exactly.
I mean, he thought he could be Eugene McCarthy.
In that,
Yeah, I mean, there was an opportunity for a candidate other than Joe Biden to make moves here and for voters in New Hampshire to say, we want to see somebody different than Joe Biden. And Joe Biden won in a write-in by 3 to 1.
But do you feel good about it? Hold on. But do you feel good about the fact that these people who did go for Dean, their stuff doesn't count anyway? There's no way for anybody in this party to register an effective, even protest vote because the DNC ziplocked this thing before anybody had a chance.
You don't think if there had been an unexpected level of support for Dean Phillips in this process today, that there would have been more of a reckoning? There was absolutely the opportunity for people to make their voice heard, but people want to see Joe Biden be the nominee. Joe Biden beat Donald Trump
what are you
in 2020.
In terms of people not what part of it makes you feel they were cut off from the process?
Well, the fact that, first of all, I think Dean Phillips begged everybody to run, begged Gavin to run, Gretchen to run. The people who were basically managing themselves for 2028 didn't want to run, so he had to kind of kamikaze himself. But the way that the DNC is operating is sending the signal that this is Joe Biden's party, perfectly fine, and that no dissent is welcome, and that's the message that's being received.
I think here's what I think.
Incumbent president, though. I mean, he is the head of the party. It is Joe Biden's party.
Right.
I mean, he is the head of the party.
Well,
now, you may not want to see him be the nominee, but a lot of Democrats
tell that to all these young voters.
A lot of Democrats
Here's the reality. A lot of people have expressed concerns. I've expressed my own concerns, but I think that there's such a focus. There is affection for Joe Biden in the Democratic Party.
Always.
But there's also a great fear of Donald Trump. And I think that there are a lot of people who thought about running, who quietly thought about running, and thought, I don't want to do something. He's going to be the nominee of the Democratic Party, and I don't want to damage him in that cause. And so that is the reality of what happened. As long as Joe Biden wanted to run, he was going to be the nominee of the party.
But there's always, can I just say really quickly? I mean, look, there's always, historically, there's hand-wringing, right? There's always hand-wringing around the re-election. There's always concern. I think, Axe, you could speak to concerns in 2012 about Obama's candidacy. Of course, when you're looking at a president who has had 4 years in office and, people have zeroed in on their lines of attack and, this is not an unprecedented political moment. It does not mean that Joe Biden is in some way historically vulnerable. I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. But
he is historically vulnerable.
I don't think that's true.
Historically vulnerable.
Then why did Democrats overperform in 2022? Why did they overperform?
We're talking about 2024, and you and I read the same polls. You know he is historically vulnerable. That doesn't make Donald Trump a world beater, but he ain't getting any younger. And these numbers haven't been getting any better, and you can't fix it. And you might be able to fix some of it with Trump, and that's why you want Trump so bad. You say he's a threat to democracy, but you've been begging to put him on the ballot, which I still don't understand. But he is historically vulnerable for exactly the reasons Van just pointed out. You've got tons of constituencies who are mad about what's been done for them or not done for them, and you've got a bunch of people who don't think he's got the mental capacity to hold the office. It is historic vulnerability in this incumbent.
It is also historic that he's the oldest presidential candidate in history. And yes, Donald Trump is old as well. But the reality is the two largest voting blocs going into 2024 are Gen Z and millennials. Two generations that are going to feel completely disenfranchised by two octogenarians running against each other. Unfortunately for Democrats, those voting blocs tend to trend to Democrats, and they're not energized under Joe Biden. I do think that you're running into a number of different constituencies that are core to the Democrats to get by, and they're just not lining up behind Biden.
It's also, I mean, yes, it is true that there was some, Bernie Sanders and others raised some issues in 2011. There were concerns about Obama, but he was 30 years younger, and he was stronger in polls. And so the concerns are legit. I think it's water under the bridge now because Joe Biden is running. He's going to be the nominee of the party, and I think the party's going to try and unify behind him.
Coming up, we're going to take a look at how the problems the voters are facing factored into their vote for Trump and what that means for the presidential race in the months ahead. We'll be right back.
And we're back with a key race alert. Let's check out the big board. 82% of the estimated vote in, and Donald Trump is still in the lead. 54.2% of the vote. 146,589 votes. He is almost 29,000 votes ahead of Nikki Haley, who is pulling up the rear with 43.7% of the vote. It's been about a 10 or 11 point lead for several hours now. Voter dissatisfaction is feeding Donald Trump's support in New Hampshire and beyond. Let's go back to David Chalian with more from our exit polls. David.
That's right, Jake. There is no doubt that Donald Trump has sort of tapped a vein here in the Republican primary electorate among those dissatisfied with the way things are going in the country. So if you combine people who say they are dissatisfied and angry about the way things are going in the United States, that made up 80% of the electorate, basically, in New Hampshire tonight. And Trump won those voters 61% over Haley's 38%. Another big swath of the electorate were those that say the economy is not good or poor. So combining those two together, that's 3/4 of Republican primary voters today who say the economy is not good or poor. Trump wins them 2-1, 67% to Haley's 32%. Among those who say that life for the next generation is going to be worse, a majority of voters, 57%, believe that. Trump wins them by nearly 20 points. 59% for Trump, 40% for Haley. And among those who said the candidate quality that they were looking for the most in the candidate was somebody who fights for people like them, looking for a fighter. About 1/3 of the Republican primary electorate was looking for a fighter, and Donald Trump fits the bill. 86% of those voters went to Trump, 14% went to Haley. Jake.
All right, because he fights, as they say. Aaron Burnett, there is the Trump electorate right there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a dark view of the world, right? And you're looking for someone to bail you out of a dark perspective, and that's what you see, right, yeah. Abby? I mean, people who are angry, people who see things going in the wrong direction, that's where they gravitate.
People who think Trump tells it like it is, people who think that Trump, even though he might offend you, at least he's saying what he thinks, and all the other politicians are just kind of telling you what they think you want to hear. There's a personality element to Trump. That's been the thing that I think a lot of his opponents have never been able to crack. That's going to be probably one of the biggest driving forces of support for him going forward, especially in the Republican Party. I don't think it's going to turn all that much on a bunch of issues. I think it's going to turn on Trump. Who is he? What is his demeanor like? Do voters find that repelling, or do they find that attractive? And I don't know that we really know fully the answer to that question, because it is going to be on the margins. And Trump, over time, has become such a part of the firmament here that people are getting used to Trump. They're not as outraged by it anymore. And how much of that is going to change the way that he's received by the marginal voters who are going to decide this race in a handful of states in this country?
In 7 states.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think one of the things I thought was interesting in all of the numbers that have come in over the last 2 states is just how much immigration and the border is really driving Republican voters. It's such an animating issue. And it comes at a critical time, too. This is something that they're trying to resolve right now in Washington. It's tied to the desperately sought aid to Ukraine. But if Republicans decide to go forward with that, it takes away that central issue, which complicates things here in Washington. But that is, if we're talking about issues that could drive the campaign, to drive the GOP electorate, that's one of the ones clearly from tonight.
But what's amazing about that is when it comes to Trump being a fighter, and what you've heard how the other GOP rivals talked about Trump throughout this campaign, was they talked about his failed policy achievements, the fact that he did not achieve what he promised to do on the campaign trail. One of the biggest ones was building the border wall. And Trump will push back on that all day long and say he did, but he barely built any of the new border walls, certainly not what he was promising. And as Ron DeSantis would often say, he did not make Mexico pay for it, which was obviously a signature campaign promise. And I think when they tried to attack him on that, GOP voters did not hold him accountable for that. They were not upset with that. It doesn't show up, even though immigration is one of their #1 concerns. And Nikki Haley has made the argument, if he did build the wall when he was in office, then the immigration numbers would not be as high as they are now. They would not be dealing with the influx because it would already be there and no president would have torn it down. So it is this interesting conundrum where you see where the voters are not punishing Trump for not having followed through on that promise, and yet he's promising to do it again in a second term. And I think what you hear from a lot of the skeptics is that, why do you believe that he's going to do it now if he didn't do it the first time?
Something that's interesting also about the immigration issue, which is, look, obviously there is a crisis at the border, and obviously it's indicative of a failure of the Biden administration and every previous administration in Congress as well. But the degree to which voters in Iowa and New Hampshire can blame their economic discontent on that crisis, I think there's very little evidence for it. Now, you can say that there's plenty of reasons for border states to be upset, or plenty of reasons for people in inner cities where Governor Abbott and Governor DeSantis have sent a lot of these migrants and they've been sapping the social services systems. But I don't know that this is a true crisis in Nashua or Des Moines.
It's not an economic crisis.
Right, that's what I mean.
It's a cultural
crisis. It's a cultural crisis, and
it's
indicative of an administration not functioning.
But that's what Trump is tapping into. It's not, I mean, the policy is what it is, but Trump is tapping into immigration as a cultural issue about the country being taken over by brown people and people from other parts of the world. That's what his appeal is all about.
But Abbott, by sending those migrants to the northern cities, Jake, has transformed this issue in this country.
He has, absolutely. And our coverage of the New Hampshire primary continues next.